The Darkest Heir. 1. Dylan. What the hell did I get myself into now? How is it I am forever getting myself into situations like this? These are just a few of the thoughts that keep going through my mind as I lay here with my face in the dirt. One good thing about this is that the dirt is soft and has a rich smell to it, like ground coffee mixed with rainwater. It's not such a bad smell and I probably wouldn't mind any other time to lie here, but the circumstances I'm in now are not ideal. My heart feels like it's about to beat out of my chest, and my temples feel like someone is beating them like a damn drum. I guess this is what I get for losing my temper like this again, but I mean, I tried really hard to keep my cool. Well, sorta hard. There are just some things that I can't ignore, and bullying is at the top of the list. Being bullied my whole life kinda makes me prone to jumping in to help others so that they don't experience the things I do. I'm not trying to be a savior or anything, hell, I can't even rescue myself, but I like to look at it like my own personal form of therapy, or retribution maybe, who knows. And this time remember your place, Aaron said as he spit in my hair before turning to walk away to his awaiting friends. I could feel the moisture from his saliva sink into the back of my shirt, and that is when the last shred of common sense left me. Even though Aaron is only the nephew of Alpha Rogan, he acts like he is the next Alpha in line since Alpha Rogan has no male heirs to hand over Blood Moon Pact to. It doesn't help the fact that his friends all make him think that he's more important than he really is. Pushing myself up onto one knee was much harder than I wanted to admit, but I could hear the murmurs from those around us as I eventually got both of my feet under me, and slower than I would have liked, stood to my full height. I felt more confident than I looked, and without a mirror, I could only imagine what my face and clothes look like, but I am done being disrespected and treated like I am less than the others. No one deserves to be ridiculed for being different, especially when our whole damn species is so different from the vast majority of the population. When have I ever listened to you before, you **CK. Aaron's face lost the smirk that he habitually wore as he turned to face me. In fact, it was so rare to see anything other than that **T eating grin. I had to hold in the shiver that ran down my spine from the predator standing in front of me. Eyes the color of lava glowed as I watched Aaron try to keep his wolf at bay. Little did he know that two could play at this game, and I was tired of male wolves thinking that they were the only ones who were terrifying. Letting Rey out was easy now, and she was ready to get a piece of this a whole. I also had no inclination to stop her even though a small part of me was trying to remember why I should. No one is around to keep me from finally killing you, you stupid C***NT. If I were you, I would watch myself. His face shifted for just a moment and his glare didn't hold the same threat as his words, but before I knew it, it was gone. Huh? Little did he know, I was done watching myself and I had stopped caring about what happened to me long ago. People don't realize that if all they ever show you is hate, you learn how to hate yourself more than anything else. Standing there letting Rey come forward, I embraced the shivers that prickled my skin because she sat right under the surface waiting for my final approval to come out. Having no friends or family made it easy to keep what my wolf looked like a secret since no one went on runs with me, but it also prevented me from knowing what anyone else's wolf looked like too. What is she? She's some sort of freak. Is she even from our pack? Aaron's little lackeys are such idiots, but it was funny hearing the same thoughts that run through my mind come out of their mouths. Having thought those same things was one thing, but hearing them say it felt way more uncomfortable than I wanted to admit. Standing here like this made me almost forget why I was in this situation, but as my gaze quickly shifted to the side, I instantly remembered. Lesia and Duncan were both on the ground a short distance from Aaron's lackeys. They were no longer curled up in balls on the ground though. Duncan was trying to help Lesia to her feet, but was still in an awkward kneeling position himself. Unsure if they were afraid of me or if they had been the ones to say those things about me, I quickly turned my attention back to Aaron. Regardless of what they may think of me, while this fight may have started for them, it was now completely about me. Aaron has always had it out for me and I knew damn well he would not miss an opportunity to belittle me, even if there was no one around to look cool in front of. For some reason the thought that those two saw me as a freak hurt just a little. It surprised me that I could even feel those things still, but nonetheless, there it was. My mind was moving so fast while I was trying to take in everything around me, I hadn't realized that Aaron hadn't moved and was still standing there staring. Though his eyes were still glowing, the look on his face had shifted from pure rage to intrigue. What are you? Well, that was one of the last things I expected to come out of Aaron's mouth, so I was unprepared with a response and just wound up gaping at him. Are you dumb or something? I asked what you are. So I hadn't imagined it, but it's really hard to explain to someone what you are when you don't even know yourself, so I figured I would just wing it. I'm a wolf, you idiot, just like you. You may be a wolf, but you sure as hell are not like me, Aaron barked out. Again, I felt a small stitch in my chest from the pain of being reminded that there was no place I truly belonged, but I'd be damned if I would let him see that. You're right. I'm not like you, I responded as I moved my feet into a fighting stance. I'm better. Those two little words pushed him over the edge and I only had seconds to let Rey come forward and shift to keep Aaron from chomping down on my throat. The last I remember was feeling a sharp pain in my head when Aaron's large auburn wolf and Rey were thrashing around on the ground and then it all went black. 2. Dylan. By the time I regained consciousness, it was almost dusk, and I was alone, as usual. Why must it always be like this? Even when I'm trying to help, nothing goes the way I think it will. It would help if I could actually remember how it ended, but maybe it's for the best. The way my body hurts, I'm sure that I lost this fight as well. Whoever said no good deed goes unpunished was full of sh*t. Being punished is one of the most reliable parts of this miserable life. Expecting anything other than pain and misery is a child's fantasy, and I stopped believing in fairy tales long ago. There was a dull pulsing on the right side of my head and I could feel a pulling sensation amid the pain, and I was sure that the newly knitted skin there meant I have been out for some time. Finally able to roll over to my back, I decided to just lay here and watch as the sky finished its transition from day to night. I love the nighttime, the air, the way the sky sparkles like it's full of fireflies, and the feel of the breeze on my hot skin. That's when I heard it, the soft crunch of grass being stepped on. Too bad I wasn't in the mood to reopen my cuts. I just stayed laying there staring at the sky. I couldn't sense who was coming because the smell of my own blood was so thick in my nose. Moving still hurt, so instead of turning my head, I waited until the person was in my peripheral to identify my unexpected guest. Are you awake? I immediately recognized that soft, squeaky voice. It was Lesia. As she walked slowly over to me, I saw she was carrying something in her arms. It was a large bundle, but I couldn't turn my head to get a good enough look at it. I didn't respond to her because I knew she wouldn't have walked over to me if she thought I was still knocked out. Now that she was in my line of sight, I could clearly see that she had a blanket, a thermos, and what looked like a sandwich wrapped in plastic wrap. Are you okay? Lesia came up to me and kneeled next to my chest, but not close enough to touch me. I still didn't respond to her because I was unsure what she wanted from me and why she was here. To show me pity? To thank me for helping her? To ridicule me for ending up like this? The silence stretched out much too long, and I was about to try to get myself up off the ground when she practically threw the things in her arms at me. Oh, please don't leave. I brought these things for you. I felt a little attacked, but once I had hold of it all, she bowed towards me and began to sob. Leave? I could barely move, much less leave. So, before trying to sit up, I reached out to Ray. I immediately felt her warmth radiate through my body and give me a little boost of energy. It wasn't much, but it was enough to push me up into a sitting position. Tremors rocked through her and at first it was hard to hear what she was saying through her cries, but eventually I could make out one sentence. I'm so sorry this happened to you because you tried to help me. No one had ever thanked me before, for anything really, and it wasn't joy or appreciation that I felt in that moment, but hesitation. I didn't want her pity. I didn't need her to feel sorry for me. I didn't help her for the accolades. I helped her because I physically couldn't stand back and let someone get hurt like that. Discomfort was setting in and I was not a charity case. I planned on keeping the sandwich, and maybe the thermos depending on what was in it, but I was definitely going to give her the blanket back. I slid it towards her still lowered head and slowly eased up off the ground while holding the rest of the stuff in my hands. Look, it's no big deal. I'm sure that if you came across someone getting beat up that you would have done the same thing. I mean, wouldn't anyone do that if they were presented with the same situation? There were no other words that she needed from me, and we were not friends, so I turned to leave, but not before I quietly thanked her for the food. You're wrong. I wasn't sure that I heard her, so I just kept walking. Limping, I just kept limping away from her and back towards my house. She must have finally gotten all her tears out because I didn't hear her come up behind me. It wasn't until she was about to reach out and grab me that Ray sent a burst of energy my way so that I could dodge her grasp. Didn't you hear me? I said you were wrong? I wouldn't have done that. No one does that. Not in this dim pack. We were a few feet away from each other, and though there were no more tears, I could see the devastation on her face. I don't know what she wanted from me. Did she want me to agree with her, or refute her words? I mean, come on, I just got my ass handed to me and I wanted to go sleep in my own bed to recover. Lesia just stood there staring at me. I could see how hard her chest rose and fell, and I knew that she was probably really close to shifting, but I didn't have the energy to deal with her problems. I have plenty of my own to deal with. Turning again to limp back towards my house, she called after me again, but this time it was a question I couldn't help but answer. Why? Why would you help me? Why would you let them hurt you like that? Funny how everyone loves to ask the questions that are the hardest to answer. I didn't have it in me to lie. Hell, I barely had it in me to walk at the moment. I don't know. Apparently that wasn't a good enough answer for her. Why do people feel that they deserve answers to every question they ask, just for asking it? It had taken much too long to take the few steps away from her that I had, but I was still well within earshot to hear her. Dylan, what are you, really? It took everything I had left to keep the tears from falling from my eyes, and there was no way I would be able to do that if I looked at her, so I kept my back to her when I spoke. If I ever find out myself, I'll let you know. There was no way that I was going to be able to eat or drink whatever it was that Lesia brought for me, so I made sure that I was far enough away from her before discarding the sandwich and thermos by a tree. No, I would not be indebted to anyone, even for something this small. I knew the kindness of others didn't come free, and I would never put myself into a situation like that ever again. 3. Dylan. Home. I had finally made it home, but the relief that I had anticipated filling me, well, didn't. Home. What makes a place a home? I didn't know how to answer that to myself. Looking at my dark one-bedroom cottage from the outside made me feel desolate and empty instead of warm and welcoming. That's what a home should bring, right? Warmth. Maybe I'll find out one day, but as of yet, I have never felt that in any of the places I have called home before. The Pack orphanage was warm, but none of the people there were ever very kind to me. It had been the only home I had ever known, but I never once felt like I belonged there. At 15 I had finally been given permission to move out on my own with the condition that I would maintain my grades and work part-time to help pay for my own expenses. Living on Pac-land was not like living in the human world. We didn't have the same kinds of rules, lifestyles, or problems as each other. The type of lives that shifters or magical beings live is tougher, so we tend to mature much faster. In Pac communities we marry and mate before we are even out of our teens, and many of us become warriors even before that. Adolescence is almost non-existent in this world. The world we live in seems to exist in a separate little bubble inside the real world or outside of it, depending on how you like to look at it. The stories, books, and movies that exist don't ever paint the pictures of what Pac life is like. My life has never been easy. Comparing myself to others has always been hard, but trying to live up to a world like the human world that seems so close, but yet so far, made me feel inconsequential. When Alpha Rogan gave me permission to live in one of the empty bunk cabins, I jumped at the opportunity. I found a part-time transcription position that allowed me to work remotely. The company was owned by some in the know humans, and they gave me a laptop, equipment, and phone to use. Ray must have been still mostly out of it, because it's not like her let my feelings get the best of me. I know it's not her responsibility to control my emotions, but I had never relied on anyone in my life beside her. So many things were trying to go through my mind as I stood in front of this little house, but none of them brought me satisfaction. Ray was probably the only thing that ever helped me get through this life. I guess Ray was home for me. I mean, she has been with me since before I can even remember. Not knowing what living with parents or a family is like, I honestly couldn't compare. We were taught in school that we would meet our wolves on the night of our first shift. For most wolves this happened between the age of 13 and 15, depending on how long it took us to transition into adulthood or puberty. Somehow I ended up being an exception to this rule because Ray has always been with me. Now, I wasn't able to complete my first shift until the first full moon after my 14th birthday, but still existed inside of me. During classes in grade school when we went over this information, I knew better than to ask any of my teachers about the voice that lived inside my head. No matter how young I was, I knew that if I shared this information with anyone that they would have sent me away or tried to lock me up somewhere. Maybe it was luck, or maybe it was because I had been so royally f***ed over when I was born, that the gods saw fit to try to give me something to help me get through this miserable life not so alone. I usually love the fact that I was able to live out here on my own, away from the pack house and children's home that I grew up in, but today, I am far from thrilled at the prospect of how long my walk is going to be. The gods must be feeling charitable, because I was absolutely certain that there was no way that I could have made it home on my own. Either that or they have something else in store to torture me and needed me around a little longer for it to play out. Taking a deeper breath than I probably needed, I leaned forward to propel myself forward toward the door. I just needed to get inside to my bed and then I could finally rest. All the questions from today were running through my mind on replay. I had no answers though. None for them. None for myself. Why did I even care about what they think of me? I have known for a long time how much I am disliked in this pack. Learning how to push past their words and actions is something I have been doing for years, but for some reason I can't shake it today. Maybe it was because I lost control and let someone else see Ray. This was the first time in a long time that anyone other than Alpha Rogan and a few of his personal guards have seen me shift. Knowing what I look like has always made me insecure, but since I haven't seen what others' wolves look like, I am unsure of the differences between Ray and other wolves. To me, she is the most beautiful creature I have ever seen. And of course Ray claimed she was a pure goddess. I would love to compare her to others in my pack, but since Alpha Rogan has prohibited this to keep me safe, I have never chanced it. Well, at least before today. My head was killing me, and I couldn't think anymore. I just needed to get inside, but in my hurry to get away from everything, I noticed too late that the door was slightly ajar. Instead of leaning against it, it fell right open with my weight and I found myself falling. I landed flat on my face for the second time today. It took too long to try to pull on Ray and get her to check our surroundings for the intruder, so I just gave up and let whatever may happen, happen. In the back of my mind I silently prayed that Aaron hadn't come here and wanted to try to finally finish me off for good. There would be no way that I could fight him, or much less anyone off at this point. The smell of alcohol, pepper, and soap hit me like a ton of bricks, and I knew that I was not going to get to rest anytime soon because there was definitely someone in my house. 4. Dylan. Was that a hand? There was a hand hovering above my head and I couldn't hold in the giggle that escaped my lips. I had seen a movie once where there was a hand that was able to move around on its own before while not being attached to a body, but I never thought I would see something like that in real life. The strong scared hand moved closer to my face, and that it when I heard, "Really Dylan, are you just going to continue to lay there and ignore me?" Well, hands definitely don't talk, and as I craned my head to the side I saw the face that belonged to the voice. Alpha Rogan was just a few inches away from me and still had his hand extended to help me up off of the floor. If this night wasn't bad enough, I had not expected to come home and find him, of all people, here. For a split second, I hesitated, before moving myself to reach out for his hand, but I knew that if he was here there was no way that he hadn't already heard what happened earlier today. As he helped me slowly get up off of the floor, he walked me across the small living room and towards one of the 2 chairs that were tucked under my tiny dining table. I sat down gingerly because every part of my body felt like it was bruised, and it occurred to me too late to try to hide just how much pain I was feeling in front of Alpha Rogan. The look that he gave me let me know that he had seen the wince I belatedly tried to hide. Gods, would this night ever come to an end? I didn't think that I could take much more before I finally just collapsed, but there was no way that I could rush this man out of my house before he was ready to leave. I sat sitting anxiously at my small little second-hand table while he walked around my little kitchen and made me a mug of warm honey milk. The little yellow mug that he placed in front of me smelled divine, and I sighed out loud as I picked it up and felt the warmth of the mug start to soak into my palms. Alpha Rogan sat across from me, and the chair groaned as he adjusted himself in the seat. I noticed immediately that he was dressed in a dark blue business suit, which means that must have stopped by right after a dinner or meeting. Hope filled me suddenly that maybe, just maybe, the gods were on my side and he hasn't heard what happened earlier between me and Aaron. The odds were slim because everyone knows that there is nothing that happens on the Packlands that Alpha Rogan's eyes and ears don't know about. My heart was racing, but the look of concern that he was giving me made that little glimmer of hope jump to a sparkle. That is until he asked, "Dylan, what in the gods happened to you?" How did I forget that my body probably looked as awful as it felt? Lifting the mug to my lips, I took 2 long gulps of the sweet milk and hummed as the warm liquid went down my throat. I knew that Alpha Rogan could tell that I was both enjoying the milk and using it as a way to bide my time and think of how I was going to explain what happened. Finally, looking up at him, I decided that on a very thinned out version of what happened and explained that I got into an argument with someone after classes. I knew that I was gripping the mug a little too tightly in my hands, but it was way too hard to look at the face of the feared bloodmist Alpha and pretty much lie my off. Alpha Rogan sat forward and softly grabbed my chin in his right hand. Holding it softly, he tilted my head from side to side, and I could swear that I could feel the heat of his eyes as they swept across my skin and took in every detail. My attention flicked to his as he turned my face so that I was looking right at him and asked again, "Dylan, after all this time, why do you think that you can lie to me?" The hold he had on my chin made it impossible to look away from his brutally handsome face. Though there was no emotion written there, I knew that if I tried to lie again he could become angry in less than a second. I didn't have the energy in me to try to keep lying, so I finally broke down and told him everything that happened between me and Aaron. While I left out the part about Lesia being there when I awoke, I didn't keep any details out in case he went to the others to confirm what I was telling him. Though this was not the first time that Aaron and I had gotten into an argument or altercation, this by far was one of the worst ones. Alpha Rogan was fully aware of the animosity between me, and well, everyone my age, but especially my relationship with Aaron and his groupies. We sat there for a moment just looking at each other. I had no idea what he was thinking, and I wished, not for the first time, that Alpha Rogan was my father and that he was here because he genuinely cared for me. Alpha Rogan let go of my chin and casually sat back in his seat. Dropping eye contact, I went back to staring at my little mug until I noticed that he was running his hand through his hair. Suddenly he brought the other hand down so hard on the table I thought it might crack in half. The mug I had been holding onto fell over and the milk spilled out onto the table and began running down onto the floor. Quickly, Alpha Rogan reached out to grab the small stack of napkins on the counter behind him and he moved to clean up the mess. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure that he could clearly hear it. I knew that whatever was going to happen next would probably not end well. The little strength I had left was creeping in as I tried to focus on what was happening and how I was going to get out of this. I was about to reach out and take the napkins to clean the mess myself when Alpha Rogan kneeled down next to me to clean the rest of the spilled milk from the floor. But just as quick as he had moved to clean, he reached out his hand and grabbed my chin. I had no choice but to look him straight in the eye. This time, he growled out his question, "Dylan, what have I told you about letting anyone see Ray? What the F***ck were you thinking?" 5. Dylan. I didn't want to pull away from him because I wasn't sure how he would react and the amount of pressure that he was using worried me. I know I messed up, but it's not like I did it on purpose, and this was only one in a handful of times that this has happened. "Dylan," he growled, "I asked you a question." The grip that he had on my chin was unforgiving. It felt like my molars were being crushed. I held his stare and started to apologize. "I'm so sorry, Alpha Rogan." The color of his iris started to change and I could tell that he was trying his best to hold his wolf at bay. "I don't want to hear your excuses, Dylan. Haven't I told you what would happen to you and to Ray if anyone else were to see her?" he growled. Pressure. There was suddenly so much pressure that I could feel my eyes begin to water. I knew better than to pull away from him, but I wasn't sure how much longer I could stand it. We stayed like that for a few more moments, but when the first tear fell from my lashes, he let go. Immediately, I pushed back into my chair and once I felt my back hit the worn cushion, I let out a small sigh. This wasn't the first time that Alpha Rogan had punished me, so I wasn't sure if this was over or if it had only begun. Ray was ragging, both at what Alpha Rogan was doing, but mainly at the fact that she had no strength left to protect me. Visibly, Alpha Rogan seemed like the picture of composure, but I knew him well, and I could see that he was on the verge of losing control. Nothing I did would make this better. I couldn't go back and erase what happened, nor could I erase the memories of those who saw me shift. As Alpha Rogan stood, I held my breath and tried to prepare myself for further punishment, but fortunately nothing came. He walked over to his chair, but instead of sitting down, he pushed it under the table and pulled his phone from his inside jacket pocket. I watched him deftly swipe along the face of the phone for a few seconds, and then it vibrated a few times before he hit the button on the side to shut down the screen. My brief moment of reprieve was now over and his full attention was back on me. "Dylan, I have my men working on the situation as we speak. I will personally make sure that no one who Soray speaks a word of it to anyone else. Unsure if his words were supposed to fill me with joy or dread, I just sat there staring up at him. Dylan, I'm sorry if I hurt you, I didn't mean to. You know that I would never hurt you intentionally, I just go caught up in the moment. Can you find it in your heart to forgive me? I spoke before my brain had a moment to process what he said. Of course, it's my fault. It was my fault. If I would have thought about what I was doing, I wouldn't have ended up making such a stupid mistake. Nodding in agreement to my words, Alpha Rogan walked towards the door, but he made a point to softly pat the top of my head while he passed. Make sure that nothing like this happens again, okay? Words failed me in that moment. Whether it was due to the fact that he apologized, or from the small show of affection, all I could do was nod emphatically at him. Good, he said as he reached my front door. As he walked through and was about to close it, he smiled softly and said, "Remember Dylan, everything I am doing it to help protect you." Then he was gone and I was finally alone. Sometime later that night I had finally found the strength to take a warm shower, put some clean clothes on, and eat some leftover chicken and rice I had in my fridge. I almost wished that I hadn't got rid of the thermos and sandwich Lesia had given me. I ate in my bed and tried to watch a movie, but my mind kept replaying everything that happened today. Finishing my food was harder than I would have liked. My jaw was so sore and it hurt to chew. I turned the volume down on the TV and decided to try to get some rest. I didn't have to work until tomorrow afternoon, so I set my alarm to wake me up an hour before my shift. Sleep found me quickly, but my dreams were filled with vivid nightmares. Beasts and fires and blood rolled through my mind, and when I finally forced myself to wake, I swore that I could still smell blood. I hated to use them, but I needed to rest so that my body and Ray could recover. So I reached into the little drawer by my bed and pulled out the bottle of sleeping pills the pack doctor prescribed me. Double-checking that my phone alarm and my small alarm clock were both set, I popped the pill in my mouth and swallowed it dry. By the time I laid back on the pillow and covered up, I was already drifting into oblivion. Somewhere off in the distance I could hear my alarm, but it sounded different. Sleep had me so completely, but I knew that the noise was familiar even though it was faint. Right on the cusp of awareness, I tried my hardest to focus on waking up, on breaking through the fog of the medicine. Awareness of my body let me know that I was almost fully awake, so I started to stretch and finally opened my eyes. The room was darker than I had expected and both my phone and alarm clock were going off, but they were no longer on the side table. Carefully, I rolled over towards to the side of the bed, and found both of them underneath one of my pillows. As I reached for my phone, I saw that I had a missed call notification flashing on the screen. Shocked that someone had actually called me, I immediately opened the phone to see who it was, and that is when I noticed the time on the top right corner. I was 45 minutes late for my shift. *T. I have never been late, or called in for a shift since I got this job. I tumbled out of bed and ran out of the room to the computer desk in the living room. I hadn't even bothered to turn off the alarm clock. Switching on the computer and monitors seemed to be taking too long, but it gave me a minute to grab a glass of water, throw on my headset, and get settled into my oversized desk chair. As the screens finally loaded, I navigated to my company website and began to log in. The moment I clocked in, my messaging system popped up and I got an inter-office call coming through with a request to connect, and I immediately knew who it would be. Bracing myself as best as I could, I cleared my throat, and answered the line. "Good afternoon, this is Dylan Solemeyer. How may I be of service?" The voice that came through the line was as unfriendly as they come. "You could be of service if you got your A to work on time." 6. Dylan. "I'm so sorry, sir, it will not happen again. This is definitely not how I wanted to start my weekend, or my shift." The voice on the other end of the call was none other than my manager Rowan. Rowan Winters is not only my direct boss, but he is one of the youngest managers in the company. Since I worked from home, I have never met him in person, but the authority in his voice always makes others seem to fear him. To be honest, Rowan has always seemed to dislike me, but for no other reason than I was given special permission to not only work remotely, but to never have to attend meetings in person, or on video calls. "Dylan, you know that if you are not going to make it in for a shift that you have to give us prior notification." Crap, I knew that and I had made sure that I set my alarm to go off with plenty of time for me to get up, but I guess my mind and body needed more rest than I had anticipated. I was about to try to explain to him what happened last night, but he immediately cut me off. "I don't want to hear your excuses, Dylan. Are you going to be able to work your shift today or not?" Yes, I was late, but I was obviously on the system and fully logged in. Did he think that I had done all this if I had no intention to work? "Apologies, Mr. Winters, I did not mean to be late today, but I will be able to work the rest of my shift today and I can even stay later and make up the time I missed today if you'd like." It was obvious that Rowan was pissed with my response. "You will make up the time, and you will also make sure that this doesn't happen again. Just because you get special privileges doesn't mean that you can take advantage of the company." Yeah, this guy hates me. Of course, sir, I apologize if I gave off that impression. There was no reason at this point to try to give him any excuses or reasons as to what happened today. I knew that he wouldn't understand or even care, so there was no point in aggravating him any further. For a few moments I could hear nothing but him breathing. There was no way I was going to make him any more upset, so I just sat there waiting to see what he would say next. Softer than I expected, he finally spoke. "You have potential to grow in this company, Dylan, so don't blow it," and then the line closed. I was so startled by his words. My face felt hot and there was a sudden burst of little flutters in my chest. That was one of the first compliments anyone had ever given me. Gods, I'm so broken, I whispered as I clasped my cheeks with both hands, but I could feel the smile that spread across my face. Ray must have gotten plenty of rest because the second I got my wits together I could feel her hearty laugh almost vibrating through me. Don't you start with me too, I grumbled at her. Ray continued her laugh, but didn't push me too hard. I know it's because she is well aware of how my life is and how much that one statement meant to me. The rest of my shift went by uneventful and I didn't hear from anyone else before clocking out around 10 o'clock. Even though my body felt much better, I was still sore, so I decided I would cook a late dinner and read the new book I downloaded last week. Ray had been pretty quiet all day, but I felt a nagging sensation in the back of my head and I knew that there was something bothering her. Ray and I shared everything that we wanted to share with each other and nothing more. Navigating through my little kitchen area was much easier than last night, and I didn't notice earlier since I was working, but my body was already feeling so much better. The aches and soreness were gone, so I put on some music to dance to while I made my meal. Happiness. That is what I felt right now. I was happy to be home, to have a job, to have money, to have food, to have a place to live, to have Ray, and to just be me. I was so happy dancing around my little house that I didn't sense the person who knocked on my door. Instantly, Ray filled my head and I could feel her protective nature come full force. I know this scent. It is someone who was in the woods with you yesterday. I was a little nervous at first, but if Ray truly sensed a threat she would have forced a shift by now. The knock came again, but this time they used a little more force and knocked a few extra times. As I walked towards the door, I focused on my senses. While I couldn't detect things the way that Ray did, I knew that if it was someone who wanted to hurt me they wouldn't have bothered knocking. Wolves didn't really need any type of weapons, since we kinda turn into one, so I went straight to the door and yanked it open. To my surprise it was Lesia, and she looked like crap. What are you doing here? I practically yelled in her face as I took in the sight of her. Lesia was a pretty girl with dark blonde hair and forest green eyes. She wasn't nearly as tall as I was, but she was much thinner. Right now, she looked as if she had been dragged through the woods and thrown in the lake. Are you going to let me in? She asked as she tried to push past me into my house. Caught off guard, I moved to the side and let her come in. No one has ever come to my little house besides Alpha Rogan. I wasn't even sure many people knew where I lived, but right now I was conflicted by thoughts of what made her come here, and why she looked like this. Shutting the door and locking it behind me seemed like a good idea. I didn't know if anyone may have followed her. As I turned to where she stood in my little living area, I watched as she slowly took in the space. I felt so vulnerable. What would she think of me? What would she think of my home? I didn't have it in me to ask her those things out loud, so I just gave her a minute to check out my humble abode. A thick heavy scent started to come from the stove and I had to run over to pull the pot off the burner so that my veggies didn't burn to a crisp. When I turned back to look at Lesia, she was sitting at the table in the same chair that I had sat in last night when Alpha Rogan was here. I didn't know how to handle this situation and I was starting to feel uncomfortable. Can I get you something to eat or drink? I asked her to try to ease my nerves. For a moment she just looked at me and then she smiled. Yes, I would love to have some of whatever it is you were burning over there. 7. Dylan. Setting the table for two was a new experience. I'm glad that I bought the table set for 4 even though I only had 2 chairs for my table. The second I sat down across from Lesia, she started eating her food. It wasn't much, a beef patty with brown gravy, some roasted potatoes, and a bag of frozen vegetables I cooked with tons of butter. By the time I had taken 2 bites, Lesia was almost done with her entire plate. She smiled at me again, and this time I saw the pink in her cheeks as if she was embarrassed by how she acted right now. You know, you are full of surprises, Dylan, she said a little sheepishly. Holding her glass with both hands, I noticed that her fingernails were chipped and dirty. I had no idea how to do this, have a conversation with someone. At least not with anyone my age. I shoved another bite of food in my mouth and looked at my plate as I continued to eat. If she was here to talk, then she would have to be the one to do the talking. Ray was curious as to why she was here, but she was also wary of her intentions. Finally, she spoke. Dylan, I'm so sorry that I came here without permission. I thought of calling you, but realized I had no way of getting your number. I knew that if I didn't come right now, I might never have another chance to talk to you like this. Well, if that wasn't ominous. I still didn't say anything. I kept chewing my food, but I was now giving her my full attention. Lesia looked at me as if she wanted something from me, almost as if she needed me to ask her the questions. Or maybe not, I didn't know if I was already too deep into this. I wanted to tell you again how sorry I am for yesterday. I had to stop her. I didn't want to talk about it anymore, especially not after how upset Alpha Rogan was yesterday. You already apologized, don't worry about it. Suddenly she jumped out of her chair and started pacing the floor right beside the table. I honestly didn't know much about this girl, so I wasn't sure if this is how she usually acted. Ray wanted me to ask her what was wrong, but I was unsure if I should continue to have anything to do with this girl. It sounded like she was mumbling to herself, but I finally realized that she was talking to her wolf. That intrigued me enough to finally speak up. What's her name? Lesia stopped walking and looked right at me. What? Maybe I hadn't asked the question right. You're talking to your wolf, right? What is her name? Curiosity will be the death of me one day, but I couldn't miss an opportunity to find out more information about someone else's relationship with their wolf. Did all others have relationships with their wolves like I did with Ray? Lesia started laughing softly and then spoke. Brea, her name is Brea, and she wants to know why she can't hear your wolf. Well, that was new. What do you mean? I wasn't expecting this. Racking my brain trying to think back on all the lessons I received in my youth about our wolves was distracting me from my surroundings. Lesia had moved back to her seat and was leaning towards me on the table. I didn't remember anything in any of our classes that mentioned anything about our wolves being able to communicate with each other when we were not in that form. Ray seemed to be just as bothered by this information as I was, but not necessarily in the same way. I didn't have the capacity to think about her feelings and my own at the same time, so I decided to try to get more information out of Lesia. I didn't have any experience just talking with someone, but since she's in my house, maybe I'll have home field advantage. Our little give and take must have helped to soothe her because her posture and demeanor changed to a more comfortable appearance. Smiling, she reached back out to grab her glass and quickly drank what was left in it. Sorry, I'm not usually like this, it's just been a long day and I was starving. The look on her face seemed to soften again and I wasn't sure if she even realized it. You seem like you want to ask me something, Dylan, go ahead. I wonder if she was picking up on that or if her wolf was. Regardless, she gave me permission. Unable to keep the question in any longer, I asked, did something happen to you again? Did someone hurt you? Laughter like I had never heard in person filled the little room. Lesia was laughing so hard that I could probably count all of the teeth in her mouth. I couldn't understand what was funny about this, but I knew she would probably explain once she was done. Ray was starting to get annoyed because she wasn't sure if Lesia was laughing at me or my question. I watched her as she finally got a hold of herself. She stood up and looked down at herself. Wow, I hadn't realized how bad I look, but I didn't think you would have jumped to that conclusion right off the bat. Women in this pack were very careful to always make sure that they looked their best even when working out, so of course I was confused by her appearance tonight. I was training with Brea today. After what happened yesterday, I knew that I needed it. Her explanation made sense, and while I get pretty worked over when I do my morning workouts, I don't recall ever looking that bad. Brea wanted to try some different things and I wound up deep in the woods near the border of the packlands with no way to get back but walk. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded along in agreement to her explanation. I apologize if I gave you the wrong impression with my appearance. Even though I felt much better after hearing her words, the unease that Ray felt was still worrying. Ray, how long have you lived on your own? Lesia was now sitting down again and had picked up her feet and crossed them under her legs. Comfortable is the only word that I could think of to describe the aura she was giving off. We sat there for what seemed like hours, just talking about all different kinds of things. She shared more about herself than I did, but I was so interested in everything she had to say that I didn't want to talk about myself. By the time she finally let out a long yawn, I noticed that the time was well past 2 in the morning. Lesia slowly got to her feet. Thanks so much for such a fun night, Dylan. I hope we can do it again sometime. After she left, I cleaned the dishes from dinner and went over all that we had talked about. A sense of happiness had filled my chest, and even though I didn't want to overthink this, I really hoped that we might actually be able to do that again. 8. Rogan. What did I tell you? The smell of blood saturated the room, and Zane was aching to be let loose, but that is not what I need right now. If Zane got his way, then he would never leave this room. The point of this was to teach him a lesson, not to kill the bastard. My men were so proficient in this type of training and I knew that my presence was not actually required, but it could only help reinforce the message. Aaron wasn't new to this room, but I was tired of him thinking that he could act out and do as he pleased. There was only one alpha of this pack and he was nowhere near taking that position. Mark was waiting just outside and would take care of everything that was done here tonight. That's enough. I think he has had enough. As soon as I said that, the guards all backed away. Aaron was hunched over, but breathing steadily enough, though I knew there would be no permanent damage. I needed to let off the pent-up aggression for Zane out and go check on the border before the night ended. As I walked from the room, I instructed Mark to go in, remove all that was done tonight, but no more. If he wants to fight with Dylan, then he could heal from those wounds on his own. As soon as I reached out to my Beta and Delta, I left the guard station and immediately shifted so Zane could go patrol the area. Our scouts had seen signs that our perimeter had been breached multiple times over the last few weeks, and I was not going to be caught unaware again. Zane raced through the woods all the way up to the mountain region. No scents were out of place and nothing seemed to be breached. He knew without having to be told to check the perimeter off the coastline next. There was a reason why the breaches have started happening again, and I'd be damned if I didn't figure it out before it was too late. If anyone wanted to attack my pack, they would be gravely mistaken. The growl that Zane let loose affirmed his agreement, and he burst through the last of the brush before we hit the shoreline. A scent that didn't belong immediately piqued Zane's attention. Rage filled us both, but Zane was meticulous, and instead of racing ahead, he began to scout the area. Salt and sand filled the air, but there was a sweet woody smell that didn't belong, and for some reason the scent felt familiar. While I couldn't place where I may have encountered that scent, Zane had began to stalk his prey. Searching the surrounding area and staying unseen was easy due to Zane's ebony fur and the fact that it was a cloudy night, but this also helped the intruder stay out of sight. The scent was so soft that as we tried to follow it through the brush and foliage, the wind began to blow and it seemed as if it was trying to remove it from the air. If I was anyone else, I would have thought it was nothing but coincidence, but it was too obvious that there was something hiding the scent. Zane had enough and let out a frustrated growl at the sky. Nothing, and I mean nothing, moved. The bugs and small animals nearby all stopped their calls. A predator was in their vicinity and they, along with the uninvited guest, knew that the alpha of this land was among them. My patience had worn thin and I forced Zane to shift with me. I walked barefoot and naked along the beach. It has been years since someone had the audacity to sneak onto my pack lanes. If my reputation was enough to scare my enemies away, the trail of death I have left to warn others away should have been sufficient. Zane wished to shift back and try to pick up the scent, but he knew better than to demand anything from me. I didn't need my wolf to fight my battles. I had plenty of my own strength to defend not only myself, but everything I have fought so hard for. Walking helped to ease the frustration that was building, but my mind was working overtime to try to place that scent. I hadn't paid much attention to how much time I had spent out here and I hadn't realized that I had left the coast behind and I was heading towards the old soldier barracks and cottages. Zane was the one who made me aware of the person in the distance walking out of a house we frequently visit. Realizing that I was but a naked still, I shifted so that Zane could get close enough to see what was going on. We were a few yards away, hidden well within the trees, but I could clearly see Dylan speaking to someone at her door. The woman had her back to me and I couldn't immediately place her, but Zane did. It was one of the girls who had seen Dylan and Ray yesterday, but my guards hadn't yet found her to keep things quiet. I couldn't help but be a little anxious at what was unfolding in front of me. Had this girl come in search of Dylan to confront her or ask questions that she had no right to know the answers to? I knew that they were not friends and I have never seen her come in or out of Dylan's house before. My guards would answer for not finding this girl and taking care of things already. I considered calling Mark, but I wasn't sure if he had finished with Aaron yet and I needed him to take care of that before anything else. Zane couldn't get any closer to hear what they were saying, but had already decided to follow her, but I wanted him to stay and watch Dylan's house. I hadn't realized until right now, just how close the intruder was to stumbling upon this area of the pack lanes. A few of the older soldiers or widows lived out here and there were patrols that came around every few hours, but no one had picked up on the strange scent we found today. That was yet another thing that I would have to speak to the patrols and my guards about. Once the woman left Dylan's home she shifted as soon as she hit the tree line and loped off into the night. Zane circled the area a few times to make sure that there was no one else around. I had no extra clothes with me so I couldn't make a stop by Dylan's house. Zane went around back to peek in the window to her bedroom. While Dylan was monitored, I never permitted any of the guards to get this close to her home, so when I picked up the same scent as before by her windowsill, I almost made Zane lose control. Not only had there been an intruder tonight, but they had made their way all the way to Dylan and Ray. It may have been a coincidence, but I knew better than anyone that things usually don't happen by accident and whether Dylan knew it or not, she had become someone else's target now. 9. Dylan. The next few days passed without much issue. In fact it was wonderfully quiet. Even Alpha Rogan hadn't made any more unexpected appearances. There was a break from classes for some type of harvest festival that they celebrated in the human lands, so staying home and working helped me pass the time. Ray finally talked me into letting her out for a run tonight since it's been almost a week since everything happened and we haven't heard anything from, well, anyone. Lesia had sent me a few texts and even called once, but our conversations had been short, sweet, and to the point. Today I worked a morning shift and was almost about to log out when my computer dinged to let me know that there was an incoming message. I hesitated to open it, but I knew they could see that I was still working so I really had no choice. Many times I had considered if the company could see me through my computer, but right now I really hoped that they couldn't. Especially not the person who sent me this message. Roanne had sent me a request to attend an in-office meeting and the look of the shock I felt was clear on my face. I'm sure that they would have died laughing if they could see me right now. In all the time that I have worked for the company, I have never been asked to go to the office. To be honest, I didn't even know where it was. While I had found the position on my own while using the school computers, essentially everything else had been set up by Alpha Rogan and the company owner. I wasn't really sure that I was reading the message right so I sat there and read the words over and over again. The words just didn't seem to make sense to me no matter how many times I repeated them. Time just slipped by and I completely forgot to clock out. My mind was racing faster than my heart and I started to panic. Why does he want to see me in the office? Did I do something wrong? Are they going to fire me? Ray was finally able to get me out of the spiral I was going into, and that is when I realized that while I was freaking out about the reason I had to go into the office I hadn't even considered the real issue. What would Alpha Rogan say about this? Whatever plans I had for today completely flew out the window, along with my appetite, my nerve, my drive, and my sense of reason. There was nothing Ray could say to me at this point to pull me back to reality. There was no way that Alpha Rogan was going to let me attend this meeting, especially if the office was off of pack lanes. I have never been off the pack lands, not even when our class took field trips. As I sat there in my little house, on my little couch, I couldn't help but remember where I came from and what I've gone through to get here. If I lose this job I'm not sure if I will be able to keep any of this and that. That is what scares the absolute *T out of me. The pain, the fear, and the tears consumed me. The darkness was flooding in and I knew that I couldn't hold it in or hold it back this time. It consumed me, it swallowed me whole, and no matter what Ray said I was lost in its grasp and there was no stopping it. Dylan. Dylan, can you hear me? Dylan. I knew that I was in my house, or at least the last thing I remember was being on my couch. But there was someone calling out to me, but I couldn't see them through the darkness. Whoever was here was calling out not just to me, but for me. The hold that was gripping me was suffocating and I could feel Ray pushing through it, but it was unrelenting and unforgiving. Ray was here. She is always here. She is always with me. As she pulled on that cord, the part of us that bound us together, I felt her refusal to let go. Ray has never forced a shift on me before, but she did now and I knew that it was the only thing that could be done to stop this, to stop me. Shifting didn't pull me out of the darkness, but helped pull it inside with me. I had never asked Ray how she dealt with the feeling and emotions that I know she felt through our bond. The ones that I couldn't control or suppress and bottle up before they would take over my mind and body. Only partially aware of our surroundings, I wanted nothing more than to let Ray take over and fall away into oblivion. Ray was still in the house, but the voice that I had heard moments ago was still nearby and I again was able to hear them. This time they were trying to help Ray not only get out of the house, but get somewhere we couldn't be seen. Not knowing what time it was and still being unable to get myself together made it hard for me to fully understand what was going on. I could tell that Ray was sprinting through the tress, and I tried to focus on the sounds around us to try to get a grip on myself. The whipping of the wind, the crunching of the grass, and the snapping of Ray's tail were soothing. My mind was working to push out the intruding thoughts that still lingered and pull on my senses to find stability. We seemed to have traveled a good distance from my home when I realized that there was too much noise around for us to be alone. Whoever it was who had helped Ray and I earlier was still with us. I could feel the anxiety building up because I still wasn't sure who was here. *T. Alpha Rogan just let me off the hook a few days ago when he found out that I had shifted in front of people. What was he going to do to me now? Even as this newfound fear began to fill me, the previous terror wasn't leaving. Ray's words were finally able to penetrate into me. Breathe, my sweet one, you have nothing to fear. Her words carried a sense of determination and resolve and it settled in me. It took a bit of time, but I listened to Ray and began to finally focus on not only where we were, but who was with us. The smell of the water hit me so fast, I immediately knew that we were by the coast. Ray must have been running at full speed to get us here quickly. As she broke through the tree line along the beach, her footfalls were much softer as she stepped on the soft white sand. A moment after she started to slowly walk the beach, a beautiful gray wolf slowly came out of the trees. It stayed a little distance away, but I could tell from the way it behaved that they were not a threat. Ray, I asked her, do you know who that is? I do, dear one, and so do you. I watched the wolf slowly walk towards us. Their eyes were staring straight at us and they were a brilliant greenish blue, but they kept their head lowered as they made their way to us. Finally, a few feet away, the gray wolf lowered itself to the ground. Ray stood over it for a moment, and then lowered her head slightly before she spoke to me. This is the girl from the other night, little one. It is the one called Lesia. 10. Dylan. Lesia? No, what was the name of her wolf again? Brea. My name is Brea. What the actual F***ck? How can we hear her, Ray? I couldn't see what expression Ray wore, but I was pretty sure I had a dumbfounded look on my face. The utter shock at being able to hear Lesia's wolf, no Brea, communicate with Ray and essentially me, was astonishing. This was the first time that I have ever heard another wolf and I didn't really know what to do. Ray on the other hand seemed pleased not only by the fact that she could clearly communicate with her, but by my reaction as well. The soft purr I felt radiating through Ray felt more of a confirmation for her, but I wasn't sure what exactly she was feeling so glad about. The soft sweet voice I had heard from Brea still filled my thoughts, and if I could cry, I probably would be bawling my eyes out right now. Never, not once had I ever thought that Ray would be able to communicate with anyone in this pack. From the beginning, Alpha Rogan had explained that my connection to the pack had been severed when my parents tried to rebel and join the opposing pack. He said that when my parents were turned away and their bonds were shredded from not only blood mist, but with each other, that I never had a bond to be reinforced with. My mother gave birth to me shortly after the war, but was already so wounded that they couldn't save her after my delivery. I had always dreamed of what her and my father could have looked like since I had no memories of them and there were no records or pictures of them anywhere. But that was neither here nor there. My brain was churning with all of the thoughts and memories that made this situation seem that much more unbelievable. On more than one occasion, Alpha Rogan had given me reasons why something like this would never be possible, and yet, here we are. Ray was patient with me as she stood there above Brea and let me try to get my thoughts in line. Take all the time you need, little one, I'm just glad to have you back, she purred to me. Yeah, I would definitely be crying my eyes out if we shifted right now. No, I would not miss this opportunity for me or for Ray. If we could actually communicate with Brea, maybe that means that I'm not as broken as I thought. Focusing her attention back to Brea, I noticed that she was still bowed down on the ground in front of Ray. But why? Ray, what is she doing? I asked her quietly, as if they might hear us. I felt Ray chuckle softly before she finally said, she is showing her respect for us, precious one. Respect? Why would she be doing that? I was no one. I mean, Ray was beautiful and strong, but we were barely even members of this pack. What reason did she have to respect us? Ray seemed as if she wanted to say something to me, but instead she spoke to Brea. Rise, young one. Brea jumped to her feet and I noticed that she was much smaller than Ray, not only in height, but in size in general. Brea seemed to be smiling, if wolves can smile, but the gleam in her eyes was much brighter than it had been moments ago. What is it you wish to ask her, my dear? Gosh, there was so much I wanted to know, but I couldn't figure out what I should have Ray ask first. Again, I could feel the soft rumble resonate through Ray. Do you wish to speak to Lesia instead, my precious? No, I screamed. I wasn't ready to let go of this feeling just yet. It felt strange, but in a good way, almost like I might actually belong here. Brea didn't say anything, but sat on her haunches as if she was patiently awaiting further instructions from Ray. It was kinda cute. The questions I wanted to ask might not have any answers that Brea or Lesia knew, so I decided to go with one I knew they could. The second I thought it, Ray asked it, why were you at our home tonight? Brea sat there for a moment and it was obvious that she was speaking with Lesia. Finally she replied, Lesia was worried about Dylan because she would not respond to her calls or texts. Well, I definitely wasn't expecting that. For one, I hadn't even realized my phone had gone off, since there has never been anyone to contact. I rarely check it. And only a few people have my phone number in the first place. But, the fact that she actually cared enough to come and personally check on me was so kind of her, especially since we have really only known each other for such a short time. New questions were running through my mind, but I didn't want these answered yet. Is this how friendships are made? Is this what it means to have someone care for you? Did someone ask her to be my friend? No, I couldn't go there. That would just pull me back into that hopeless place and I wasn't ready to go back there just yet. But for some reason I really needed to know if Alpha Rogan was involved in this somehow. While Ray asked Brea, I braced myself in case what I suspected was correct. As I listened to Ray and Brea, I let myself slowly take in our surroundings. It was full night now, thank the gods, and we were in a pretty open area near the coast. With the moon overcast by the clouds, the sand looked more like grey dust than white sand. I liked it. It was more beautiful to me in the dark of night, when things could be seen by the light of the moon and stars. Brea was still talking with Ray, when I felt her attention shift to the wooded area on the opposite end of the beach. I tried to figure out what she detected, but there was no time to process anything before she moved. It was a scent, a soft, almost undetectable sweet scent that didn't seem to belong here. The smell of an unexpected guest suddenly hit me with so much force, I barely registered that she had already turned around and was running towards it. Though I was so in tune to her, I couldn't place this particular scent, but by her reaction, I was positive that Ray knew who this was. As Ray raced down the beach, I saw that she was heading towards the border of the packlands by the small mountain range. The scent was getting stronger the further she ran, but each time I tried to reach out to her and ask what was happening, she just ignored me. Ray's heart was racing, but not from exertion. She was too strong to tire from just running. No, there was an undercurrent to the emotions that I felt her trying to hide. I pushed her to answer me, but it seemed to only make her rush towards this mystery guest that much harder. Words couldn't reach Ray, so I decided that she must have a reason for her behavior. I tried to pick up on any other emotions that she would share, but as I tried to clear my thoughts and pick up on hers, I felt a sudden tinge of fear shoot through her. She suddenly stopped running and got down into a crouching position. I could feel her racing heart, and honestly, I was almost done with this entire day. I still couldn't sense what happened that could have changed her all-out search for that foreign scent. Finally she spoke to me. We are not alone here, little one. Please do not be afraid. Well, **CK. The one thing you never say to anyone is not to be afraid. That automatically makes them afraid. I still couldn't tell who it was nearby. Maybe it was some of the pack guards, or even Alpha Rogan himself. We were too far from the main portion of the community for it to just be some random wolves. There was a soft padding in the distance that seemed to be heading in our direction, but I still couldn't pick up anyone's scent. Ray was now emitting a soft growl, and I knew that whoever was about to meet us here was someone Ray did not want to be around. The whole day turned to crap so fast, and I really wasn't ready to have to deal with any more surprises. I knew Ray could handle this, so I tried to calm my thoughts and focus on her. Ray, who is it? Who is coming? Her growl steadily got louder to match the sound of the approaching footfalls. Whoever was coming wanted us to know. The approaching wolf would reach us in seconds, but suddenly, the sound of their approach shifted from a four-legged creature to a two-legged one. Ray was full on snarling now. There was only one person who could bring this reaction out of Ray, and I knew immediately who was about to join us. And just as I thought his name, he appeared a few feet to our right. Aaron. 11. Aaron. Thanks to the time off from school, I was able to stay home and hide while I healed from my fight with Dylan and my discipline from Uncle. Mark was thorough in his ministrations, but made sure to follow every order from the Alpha. I had tried to stop the fight before it got that far. By the time I caught up with those guys, they were already making fun of Duncan and Lesia, and I walked up right as had Dylan. Damn her and her perfect **ing timing. If only I could have ended the fight with Dylan before she shifted. Unfortunately, things escalated much quicker than I would have liked. Luck was not on either of our sides that day, but it's not like it has ever really been on mine anyway. The moment I saw her eyes transition from amber to gold, I was awestruck by the beauty of the way they sparkled. I didn't even realize that I had asked her the question that popped into my head. What are you? Had anyone else caught on to how stupid I sounded? Dylan definitely did. She stood there looking at me like I was a complete moron. Regretting the words the moment they left my mouth was one thing, but replaying that scene over and over in my head just made it that much worse. Moron? I was **ing moron. Everyone looked at me like I was some privileged, holier-than-thou, alpha in training. Little did they know that I wished every day that I could leave this dim pack. Being the nephew to one of the cruelest alphas around didn't help my life the way that most wolves thought it did. I often wondered if anyone ever really knew their true alpha. If they did, they either were no longer around to tell the tales, or they had mysteriously forgotten ever seeing anything that could be construed as over the top or cruel. Regardless, there were many choices that led me to having to run night patrols with the guards. Combat and other forms of trainings were nothing out of the ordinary. Most of us did these types of trainings from the time we were teenagers, and almost all had started once we had our first shifts, but this was more than just training. This was just another way for me to be put in place and shown that I was nothing more than what he wanted me to be. I would be useful, or I would be gone. I learned a long time ago to never let him know just how much I was affected by the things he ordered done to me. My mother was the younger sister to Alpha Rowan and my father had been killed in the raid 17 years ago. Living in the pack was fun at first. We were always surrounded by members of the pack who had nothing but amazing stories about my dad. But as time wore on, Mom lost interest in the whole, living part of life. Since my uncle's wife was never able to have children, he and my aunt took me in and raised me. I learned early on that people wear different faces when they are around different people. Loving, doting, and kind is the face you presented at home so that you didn't scare the ones who lived with you. Strong, proud, and confident is the one that you wear in front of those you want to rule. But vicious, conniving, and deadly is what you show to those you want to destroy. Rogan Blura was a man with many faces and I wasn't even sure if I have ever truly seen all of them. That is one of the many talents he has taught me over the years as well. Running the northern perimeter at night may seem like punishment since I had to run it from dusk to dawn with no breaks, but little did they know that I loved it out here. Life in the Blood Mist pack was easier for wolves than in other packs, but everyone had their place and purpose here and I was no exception to that. Being out here kept me away from all of the shady shit that I truly wanted no part of. Here there was no need for masks, no need to pretend to be something, nothing but me and the trees, and the small little animals that roamed in the night. I wondered what they thought of me on nights like this. Were they scared of me, or annoyed by my presence in their domain? Did they see me as anything more than a stupid dog following orders? How I wished I could ask them, while simultaneously being deathly afraid of what they would say. That probably said more about me than anything. Dane hates when I get like this, but I loved that he didn't let my thoughts bother him in his task. Patrolling through the dense foliage was nothing to Dane, in fact I wasn't sure who enjoyed it more, him or me. Dane was a born protector. I joked that he was more lion than wolf. Annoyed as he was, I could feel the pride radiating through him every time I said or thought those things. I knew he was still mad at me for what happened with Dylan the other day, but little did he know that I was madder at myself than he ever could be at me. But he was more angry that I had to knock out the beautiful wolf she shifted into before he was able to speak to her. No one that I knew of had ever seen Dylan shift, and though I didn't know why, I knew that my uncle had something to do with it. So the moment I saw that she was losing control I tried to think of ways to prevent it, but it's hard to turn on one's facade at the snap of a finger. The moment I realized that I needed to get not only myself, but everyone away from her, I threw her hard enough against the boulder to knock her out, but not cause her too much trauma. Knowing that she hated me so much that I could cause her to shift in front of others was one of the worst feelings in the world. This is where my thoughts were at, yet again, when I caught the scent of musty sweet scent that didn't belong here. I called out to the rest of the patrol and instructed them head to my location. A few seconds after that my uncle informed me that he was nearby and would be joining the rest of the guards as well. There was no reason to respond to him. I knew that he would come and didn't want nor need anything else from me. As I continued to follow the scent, I suddenly encountered another scent on the wind that had not only ingrained itself into my mind, but one I never thought I would be privy to again. Dylan's wolf was nearby. Gods? Dylan's wolf was nearby and Dane was shocked and excited. It was so rare for him to ever show much emotion, so I was thrown off by his reaction, but thankfully my mind was already thinking 10 steps ahead of my stupid heart. Not only was there an intruder nearby that may come across Dylan's wolf, but my uncle and the rest of the patrol were headed this way. I knew that if my uncle caught Dylan out here he may end up not only punishing the patrols, but Dylan herself. F***CK? What the F***CK was I supposed to do? I could protect Dylan from the intruder, and possibly the rest of the patrol, but not my uncle. Dane had already switched from tracking the intruder to running towards Dylan, but I knew that she wouldn't hesitate to attack. For some reason, probably having to do with Mark, no one could link with Dylan and I wasn't sure if that held true for her wolf, but there was no way that if she saw me approach her like this that she would give me even a moment to try to find out. The sweet floral scent of Dylan's wolf was close and I could hear her approaching quickly. There was no time. I had to figure out a way to try to tell her to get as far away from here as fast and as quickly as I could. Shift now, Dane, I commanded mid-stride. I knew that this would just be another reason to extend his pretending to ignore me, but I had no choice. I had to approach her as Aaron and let her know what was going on. I landed on my own feet and continued running straight towards her, but in my haste to get to her and explain the situation, I forgot one important part. I was completely F***ing naked. 12. Dylan. The moment Aaron broke through the thick vegetation I realized two things. 1. Ray was braced to attack, and one single thought from me would release her and she would attempt to rip him apart. And 2. He was naked. The second seemed to be the biggest issue, and while Ray seemed to be unfazed by it, I definitely wasn't. Living in the orphanage did not come with much privacy when I was younger, but as we started to get older we were separated by gender and no longer used communal spaces. As much as I hated to admit it, the sight of Aaron's naked form in front of me was disgustingly appealing. Damn me and my lack of experience with, well, everything. If things had been different and I was a normal part of this pack, I would be so accustomed to shifting in front of others that nudity wouldn't bother me like this. But, since I am who I am, this was well outside my comfort zone and I was beyond grateful that he came upon Ray and not me. The look on his face shifted from one moment to the next and I wasn't sure exactly what to make of it. At first he seemed worried or annoyed, but if I wasn't mistaken, he seemed to look a little embarrassed or nervous. His pale skin looked pink, but that could have been from running or the chill in the air. I would not let my imagination get the best of me and tried to cast my own thoughts onto him. It was dark and his hair fell over his eyes so I couldn't tell if he was about to shift or not, but his demeanor seemed different than any other time we have been around each other. Hell, for all I knew he was terrified of the vicious beast standing in front of him in such a vulnerable state. Time seemed to move so slowly as I tried to focus on him without focusing on all of him. FCK me, I really need to get my SHT together. It's not like I haven't read so many romance books in my free time or studied the human anatomy while in school. This is nothing but a healthy, large, gloriously built male standing in front of me and nothing more. Ray was standing so still, the only movement was the trembling of her lips that were stretched wide to show her gleaming white fangs as she continued to snarl at him. Even the air around seemed to pulse with the tension surrounding us. Aaron stood there just as still as the trees that surrounded us, but after a moment he slowly started to lift his hands in front of him and softly spoke. Dylan, please listen to me. Ray didn't move an inch, but snapped her jaws at him as I heard her say, why? I knew Aaron couldn't link with us but, his almost invisible twitch made it seem as if he knew what she said. He was still slowly moving his hands, but not in a way that seemed aggressive. He was just lifting them up, palms out and fingers slightly spread apart. Again, he spoke softly. I know I have no room to ask you for anything, but I need you to please listen to me. Ray snapped again, but he didn't pause. He continued talking. I know you have no reason to trust me, but for the safety of Dylan you need to get away from here, now. Well damn. He was right. We had no reason to believe what he was saying and no obligation to listen to him, but the moment he mentioned my safety that way, Ray immediately searched our surroundings. The scent that she had originally been following was nowhere to be found, but off in the distance there was howling that seemed to be getting closer. I could sense some of Ray's thoughts, but she was good about keeping her emotions in check and not letting me in on what she didn't want me to know about. Her attention went back to Aaron and slowly slid her front paw back a few inches, but no more. Aaron's attention never left Ray, and though it was hard to look at him just standing there with his hands up, I could sense that he might be telling her the truth. Someone must have spoke to Aaron because his head tilted up just enough that I could get a good look at his eyes and there was no sign of the animosity and anger that usually radiated from him. Aaron's face seemed to harden just a bit, but it looked more like a pained expression. Whoever it was who was speaking to him was not someone who he seemed very thrilled to talk to. Ray slowly took a full step back, but kept her focus on Aaron. She had even stopped snarling, but her teeth were still bared as a warning to let him know that she could still attack if needed. They will be here any minute, and they can't know that you were here. There is something that they are hunting and they can't know that you were anywhere near it. Please get away from here, now. The howls were getting closer and though it seemed unbelievable that Aaron of all people would be trying to help me, there was no other explanation to describe what was going on. Ray began to retreat backwards, and I could see Aaron's chest rise and fall so quickly as if he was letting out a huge sigh. Aaron's focus shifted slightly and I knew that he was listening to someone again. It was becoming easier to focus on his face, and again I saw a slight pained expression there. We were moving further away from him, but I heard him perfectly. I'm going to shift and draw them further north so please get away quickly. This time he didn't wait for Ray to acknowledge him and he shifted right on the spot. This was my second time seeing his wolf and I was struck by not only his size, but his beautiful rich brown fur. He was already leaping away into the forest and for some reason I wanted him to look back at us, just once. Gods, what the hell was wrong with me? This guy literally beat the shit out of me so bad the other day that he knocked me unconscious. But I couldn't deny that I wanted him to see me. The real me. Ray didn't say anything to me, but I could feel her affirming touch on my thoughts as if she was letting me know that what I was feeling was okay. He was almost completely out of sight when I caught him glance back at us. Had I just willed that to happen? Gods, I was so glad that we were in our wolf form. Ray tried to keep her giggle. What the hell was wrong with me? Why did I even care about this, about him? The moment Aaron was finally out of sight, Ray broke out into a sprint back towards our house. I thought we would go back to the beach and see if Brea might still be there, but no, she was headed straight home. Little one, Ray's voice filled my mind. No one must know that you were out there tonight, no matter what. Unsure of what Ray may know that I didn't, I just let her know that I understood even though I had so many questions still. When our home was just in sight, I noticed that my door was ajar. I mean, I know that we live on Packlands, but damn, does anyone wait to get permission to go inside someone's home? Ray shocked me because instead of trying to figure out who may be inside she ran straight in. The moment we were inside, the door closed behind us and she immediately forced us to shift. I was stumbling forward with the force of the shift and was immediately covered by something from behind. The momentum from the shift and the shock of what might be about to happen propelled me forward and I was sure that I was about to fall, when someone wrapped their arms around me and stopped me before I did. Ray's voice and another spoke at the same time. It's okay little one, do not be afraid. Dylan, it's me, Lesia, calm down. I was sure that I was about to have a freaking heart attack. Lesia was holding me in an awkward position, and the fact that I was nude under whatever she had thrown over me made it that much harder to try to calm down. Ray told Brea to come here and get everything ready. Your clothes are right there on the couch and I have water boiling on the stove. Hurry. Lesia sat me on the edge of the couch and I realized, as my eyes adjusted to the soft light in the kitchen, that she was moving to the fridge. Ray, what is going on? I was a little hurt that I hadn't known what she told Brea and Lesia to do, but I'm sure she has her reasons. Ray was quiet for a moment too long, but finally answered, the hunters will be here soon to confirm that you are still here. Lesia will help with that. Please do not be angry, my precious one. Dressed, but still shaken, I went to the kitchen to find Lesia practically emptying my fridge. She had pots on all 4 burners and the little counter was covered with all types of veggies. Are you cooking for a party? I laughed out when I saw the amount of food, but Lesia only responded without taking her eyes off her chopping board. The hunting party will be here soon, right? What? Did she think that we were going to feed them? I don't get visitors, like ever, but Lesia was on a mission. Ray, what is going on? I asked her. I was more nervous now than earlier. Ray tried to calm my nerves, but I needed to know what she knew. They are not hunting something out there, they are hunting someone, and if they find them you may be in danger. 13. Aaron. Gods, that was mortifying. Did that really just happen, or is my mind playing tricks on me? Wolves are by nature not modest creatures, but Dylan has never been included in pack life and I'm not sure if she has even seen a naked man before. F***ck, what the hell was I thinking? Is that really the best that I could come up with? Make a fool out of myself while scaring the sh*t out of her and pleading for her to listen to me. To top it off, now I'm even hallucinating. There's no way I heard that, right? I tried asking Dane, but he was pissed off and wouldn't respond to me. He was so angry, I could feel it radiating through him like an intense pressure in my mind. I'm sure if it was possible for us to never speak again, he would be okay with that. I didn't have time to deal with anything else right now. We needed to get as far away from where Dylan's wolf was and try to catch the scent of the trespasser. Since someone wasn't speaking to me, I was trying to come up with a plan. Only now did I realize that Dane was already ahead of me on that front. Dane had already been trying to cover Dylan's scent by running through small patches of flowers that smelled like rotting food. He didn't run through them in full, but a few steps here and there to grab their scent and mask Dylan's. The moment I figured it out I heard him mumble, imbecile. Fine, let him call me names if he wants. I'm just glad that one of us was already trying to figure out a way to keep her out of this. Not once had I been able to keep her out of trouble, and it killed me whenever I caught her giving me those looks. At first they had looked hopeful when we were younger and in grade school. Then they turned to fear as we became teens and all started shifting and moving into our predestined roles. But the looks that killed me the most were the recent ones, the look of total loathing. It didn't matter to me what everyone else said or thought of me. They all wanted to be near me to get close to my uncle, and because they thought I had some type of power. Little did they know that I was his least valuable possession. The only person I wanted to be around was probably the last person on this planet who wants anything to do with me. That's what you deserve, Dane bit out. It hurt because it was true, but I knew that if I didn't follow his orders, he would get someone else to do something probably much worse. Dane knew that just as well as I did, but he was just angry. Angry at me, at himself, and at my uncle. Lately, it feels like something has been bothering him, and the only way he knows how to deal with it is by letting out his frustrations on me. I didn't blame him, but right now I needed to get my head in the game and make sure that we were on the same team. Just as Dane ran through another little patch of those stinky flowers, we picked up the other scent we had been following. It seems that the intruder had ran through here, and as Dane slowed down to track it, he saw that someone else had run through the same flowers we just had. It seems that this wolf was smarter than we thought. Either he has been here before and knew which way to go, or he was familiar with ways to mask his scent. Either option wasn't good, but I figured we were far enough away to call the patrol and the guards over. Dane linked with the wolf of the patrol leader and howled loudly to let them know where we were. Within a few minutes, 4 large wolves bounded into the area next to me. None of us were bigger than my uncle's beast, but he was only an inch or 2 taller than Dane. I knew that this bothered him, so I instructed Dane to keep his distance. Shift, my uncle commanded to us all. He was the only one who could link with more than one wolf at a time, and I knew he wanted me to tell them all what I found at once. We all shifted and I explained to them that as I was patrolling the area I came across the scent we had been looking for, but that it had zigzagged through the area. That must be why you smell of trash, the patrol leader said as he tried to inconspicuously take a step back. My uncle glanced in his direction and he paused in his obvious retreat. If he is smart enough to run through those damn flowers, then he is definitely here with an ulterior motive. This is no accidental trespass, this is a deliberate breach. The red gleam in my uncle's eyes let me know that he wouldn't let this go until there was buckets of blood flowing. He walked slowly around the little area we stood in and sniffed the air. None of us moved or spoke. After a moment, he ordered, I want a 24-hour patrol in this region until we catch the intruder. Under no exception should this area be left unprotected. You two, he said as he pointed at the no-named Omega guards, you two will stay here until the next shift comes to relieve you. They immediately shifted and each one went out in opposite direction to go patrol the area. With only the 3 of us now, my uncle laid out his real plan. "Captain, I want wolfsbane planted along the border and braids of silver wire spooled around the bottoms of every other tree in that same area." Shock was written on the captain's face, but I had been expecting something along those lines. While it sounded a little crazy since it would be harmful to both resident and intruder, both he and I knew better than to question the Alpha. "I will get this done immediately, Alpha," the captain replied before bowing his head and shifting into his wolf. The big chocolate-colored wolf ran off in the direction they had come from within seconds. Now that it was just my uncle and I left, I stood patiently still and waited to see how the rest of this night would play out. Dane sent out a small wave of comfort to me, trying to encourage me to be strong. My uncle seemed to be discussing something with his beast because I could see flashes of red spark here and there as he paced back and forth. I knew better than to interrupt him or speak until being spoken to. The only thought that kept running through my head was, why did she have to be out here tonight of all nights? There hadn't been any sign of the intruder for days, and the day we finally pick up their scent, she was out here too. Dane seemed to be just as worried as I was, but he was still angry with me and only acknowledged my thoughts but didn't commiserate with them. The only sounds around us were the constant thumping of paws as the two wolves continued to patrol the area around us, and my uncle's steps in the soft grass. When he finally spoke to me, he didn't even bother to look at me. "What else happened out here tonight?" "Nothing. I came across the scent and then called the patrol to meet me while I followed it to trace it to the source." Not once did my eyes leave him as I spoke. I made sure neither my heart or me breathing gave anything away. I knew that if either sounded even the slightest bit off, he would become suspicious. He was quiet again, but never stopped his pacing. As annoyed as I was getting, it really wasn't worth pissing him off any further. When he was finally done speaking to his wolf or whoever it was he was linking with, he stopped right in front of me. Blue eyes that neared black stared at me with no feeling whatsoever. It always used to hurt when I was younger by how cold he was to me when no one was around. There had never been any love in those eyes unless someone was around, and I learned that it was nothing but show from a young age. You can't hurt someone you love, and though he may not have physically hurt me himself, he watched more times than he didn't while others carried out his orders. "Do you have clothes with you?" he asked out of nowhere, and I was so thrown off by his sudden shift, I stumbled over my words like an idiot. No, I mean yes, but not on me, in my pack near the guard station a few miles back." He looked annoyed, but not angry. It seemed like he was thinking something over and finally made up his mind. "We need to go and check the closest houses to this area. If the intruder's scent is near their homes, it could be that they are either working with someone in the pack or looking for them." Dane and I were both trying to figure out who lived closest to this area when he started walking in a different direction than the captain ran off in. "I have my guards bringing clothes for the both of us. They will meet us on the beach." While it wasn't an invitation, I knew I would be stuck with him until he chose to let me leave. As we approached the beach, I saw two of my uncle's guards there with two large bundles. We changed, and instead of leaving us, they followed along as we headed to the old guard area. I had forgotten that some of the pack lived out here, but when we approached one of the smaller houses, I caught the sweet floral scent of Dylan. My head swung to my uncle, who was already watching me with a sick grin on his face. "Don't do anything stupid, boy, or this night will not end well." 14. Dylan. In less than an hour, Lesia had not only used every edible item from my fridge, but also every possible spice from my pantry. The thought of having to replace all that food would have really bothered me if it wasn't for the fact that she had created some of the most appealing dishes I have ever seen. "How did you do this?" I asked with not just awe, but true curiosity. Lesia was placing little towels on the table so that she could place the pots and pans on them without burning the tabletop. "It's no big deal really. I have been cooking with my mom for years." Cheeks flaming pink, Lesia turned her face quickly away. "I'm sorry, Dylan, I didn't mean anything by that." The pang in my chest had already pulsed with that sharp accustomed sensation. I know that there was no malice in her words, but they still caused those old wounds to open up. Ray had been fairly quiet since we got home, but I could feel her sending soothing feelings to me through our bond. Without knowing Lesia long, I knew that her words weren't intended to hurt or wound me, so I smiled at her when I replied, "It's okay. It's not your fault you have parents and I don't." Keeping the smile there was harder than I wanted to admit, but when she turned to look back at me, it was apparent that it eased her fears of hurting my feelings. With all four pans on the table, there was just enough room for us to sit and eat, but I couldn't imagine us actually eating all this food. "Do you really think someone is going to be stopping by? And if they do, what do we say about why we made all this food?" Lesia smiled enthusiastically. "We were so excited for our first official girls' night that we went a little overboard." Her smile was infectious, and I couldn't help but reply in kind. "You're right, I am excited, still nervous, but excited all the same." I grabbed us both plates and silverware while Lesia grabbed us some drinks. Even though she had eaten here with me a few days ago, this time felt different. It felt easier somehow. We had just sat down at the table to eat when Ray warned, "They're here, little one." My appetite vanished in an instant, and within the span of a few breaths the knock I had been dreading resounded through my living room. Lesia was about to get up to answer, but I knew that I was the one they would be here to check on, so I rushed over to the door and braced myself before finally opening it. To my surprise, the man who greeted me was not one of the patrol captains, but Alpha Rogan himself. He was accompanied by two guards, who I have encountered before, and to my utter shock, Aaron. As I glanced at the four-man, Aaron was the only one who tried to make eye contact with me. There was an odd look on his face, like maybe he was trying to tell me something, but when Alpha Rogan caught me looking at him, Aaron immediately plastered a grimace on his disgustingly handsome face and looked away. Wait, what did I just think? Focus little one, Ray urged me encouragingly. I stood there blocking the doorway, but politely, directed my question to Alpha Rogan only. Is there something I can help you Alpha? I asked as I bowed my head in a sign of respect. Out of the corner of my eye, I swore that I saw Aaron's posture change to a more rigid stance, but for all I knew he could have been talking to his wolf or linking with someone. I really need to stop trying to make something out of nothing. Gods, what is wrong with me? Sorry to stop by so unexpectedly, but I am checking in with all the nearby homes to make sure that everyone is doing okay. Alpha Rogan's attention was now back on me, but I could feel the other sets of eyes on me while he spoke. We are doing well Alpha, but he cut me off mid-sentence. Who is we? He asked much gruffer than he had previously spoken. I unintentionally took a step back from him and whether I meant to or not, he took that as an invitation to come in. Lesia popped up next to me suddenly and bowed to Alpha Rogan. Good evening Alpha, she chirped. We were just about to sit down for dinner. Would y'all like to join us? 4 different sets of gasps could be heard, but the smile on Lesia's face never left as she stood there awaiting his response. I have never envied someone more than I envied Lesia in that moment. She stood there, bouncing on the balls of her feet in hot pink socks, oversized sweats and her beautiful blonde hair pulled up in a messy bun with the biggest, most fearless grin on her face. How someone who looked like she weighed 100 pounds soaking wet seemed that cool and confident in front of the Alpha was beyond me. For a few seconds I had completely forgotten to breathe, but before I almost completely ran out of air, he replied. Well, if you insist and are sure you have enough to feed us all. Lesia had completely taken charge of not only the situation, but my home. Of course, we went a bit crazy cooking and ended up making way too much food for the 2 of us to eat all by ourselves, she answered happily. My little house was fuller than it's ever been and I was not entirely comfortable with it either. The 4 men thanked Lesia as they came in and walked over to the table, but only the guards acknowledged me. Aaron walked in without even a glance in my direction. A hole? Lesia's mom must have lots of parties or gatherings because Lesia was a born hostess. She had shown them all the bathroom they could wash up in, had the 2 guards move the couch, chairs, my desk chair, and had us all seated around the table in no time. To say that this was probably the most awkward dinner of my life was an understatement. No one really knew what to do so we all just sat there staring until Lesia jumped up. She explained what each dish was and then began to serve everyone by asking what they wanted. There wasn't enough room on the table now, so some of us held our plates on our laps while we ate. Lesia didn't stop there. In between bites she complimented the food, the guests, and even the weather. The level of unease had lightened a bit thanks to her, but she didn't stop there. She asked little questions here and there. Nothing too invasive or private, but simple things to put everyone at ease. Alpha Rogan was now jumping into the conversation more and asking questions of his own. After a bit, the questions started to get a little more specific in regards to things that each party wanted to know, while Lesia was trying to figure out what they were hunting and why I was so secluded. Alpha Rogan was trying to figure out why Lesia and I were now friends and if there was some kind of motive behind it. Oddly enough, Aaron didn't participate at all. It was clear that he did not want to be here. Maybe that brief glimpse of a decent human being in the woods was a once-in-a-lifetime occurrence. Even Vit and Noel, whose names I just learned, asked a question here and there. I wasn't sure if Alpha Rogan was annoyed or angry, but suddenly he switched topics and almost began to instigate an argument between Aaron, Lesia, or maybe even me. Aaron, is it that hard for you to be a little grateful for even being allowed as a guest in this home? Especially since I recall you bullying and assaulting some of the people sitting here. The color drained from Aaron's face and while he didn't look down, he did look away. As he did, he tilted his head just enough to cover his eyes with his hair. The dark black pieces that fell so gracefully against his face seemed to fall perfectly to keep his crimson eyes shielded, but the soft pink in his cheeks was on display for all to see. All the eyes around the table were looking from Aaron to the rest of us and I'm sure that he could feel them just as much as I could. Even though I hated him most of the time, for some reason, I felt a little bit of pity for him. For being his uncle, Alpha Rogan did not seem to show any type of affection for his nephew. Now, there were little fake glances and remarks, but they seemed forced and more like well-placed Ks than truly meaningful words. Lesia broke the tension. All's well that ends well I say. If things hadn't happened the way they did, I may never have become friends with Dylan and I would be the one who would be missing out. Shock and delight ran through me and I felt Ray acknowledge her words as truth as well. If we had been alone I probably would have started bawling my eyes out, but I would not let the others see me cry. Lesia bumped my knee with hers under the table and I couldn't help but smile widely. Yes, I agree with Lesia. I'm glad things happened just the way they did. Though I could still feel everyone looking at us, I got a sudden sense of fear. Not coming from the others, but it rose up in me because when I glanced around I could have sworn there had been a quick flash of black in Alpha Rogan's eyes before a small smirk played across his lips. Well, it still seems to me that apologies are in order regardless of the fortunate outcome. Though his words sounded cordial, there was a strange tone in his voice, almost like a warning, but I wasn't sure exactly who it was being directed towards. I quickly looked to everyone around the table and noticed the color in Aaron's face had paled. It was him. He was the one Alpha Rogan was threatening. Maybe he would really punish him for what he had done to me the other day. Even though he deserved it, I was uncomfortable to see how afraid he was of Alpha Rogan. Whether it was his words or it was something that he was sharing with him through their link, it struck a nerve. If Alpha Rogan was able to hurt me on occasion, what has he done to Aaron in the past? Aaron's jaw was clenched so hard, it honestly looked painful, but just as he turned to me, the sound of howling wolves seemed to fill the room. VIT and Noel were up on their feet in an instant and Alpha Rogan seemed to be staring off in the distance. I knew that someone or even multiple people were probably speaking to him through their link. Alpha Rogan finally stood and it seemed that he was linking with Aaron, VIT, and Noel because they were all shaking their heads in unison. It seems our prey does not like to be hunted. Alpha Rogan walked to the door with the three of them in tow when he turned and warned, "Do not leave this house tonight, no matter what you hear out there." Ray was frantic though I couldn't figure out why. I was about to ask what was going on, but noticed that Aaron softly shook his head as if to warn me not to. The moment they walked out of the house all four of them shifted and within moments they were out of sight. Lesia was still sitting at the table eating when I closed and locked the door and turned back around. It was a little funny to see how relaxed she seemed until I walked back over to the table. She seemed nervous all of a sudden and I wasn't sure if she was scared about what is going on out there until she asked, "How the hell have you managed to keep yourself hidden? Whoever is out there has to be here for you, you know that right?" 15. Dylan. What do you mean? There was too many things that have happened within the last few hours and I really didn't understand how it had gone from a completely normal day to one of the strangest days of my entire life. Lesia just sat there looking at me like she was waiting for an explanation, but also like she was a little afraid of what I might say. Being asked questions that were almost impossible to answer wasn't new to me but this one really threw me. I sat across from her in my big desk chair that either VIT or Noel had been sitting in. Right now I couldn't care less which one it had been. Ray seemed like she was on edge, but she wasn't telling me anything. I'm a little lost, can you please tell me what you mean? Lesia pulled her legs up and crossed them under her thighs, leaned forward with her elbows on the table and just stared at me. I felt like an oddity on display in a circus. She seemed to be trying to pull the answers out of my brain or something. Every so often I could see that there was a slight glaze over her eyes and I wondered if she was speaking to Brea. After a minute she squinted at me as if she was trying to see something deeper than surface level. After a few minutes she finally asked, "You have no idea, do you?" What could I even say? I literally had no idea what she wanted to hear from me. "Ray, what is she talking about? Do you know?" I asked Ray, but wouldn't respond to me. "Dylan, you're not from this pack." "Yeah, tell me something I don't know." Why would she say that to me? Did she think that I didn't know that no one welcomed me in this pack? I have never been welcomed here, not by anyone. There was no holding back the tears this time. I had no idea what the F***ck was going on, but at this point I was just completely beyond words. I had nothing left. All the emotions from today just caught up with me. Crumpling both inside and out, there were nothing left to hold me up any longer. It came on to sudden for Ray to do anything for me, and I heard rather than saw Lesia come around the table. Warm strong arms embraced me and tried to hold me up while Ray filled my mind with words of encouragement, but they were both too late. I fell into oblivion and let everything completely consume me. Bright light met me when I opened my eyes and it took me a minute to figure out where I was. The smell of bacon filled the air and as I stretched my neck to turn to see who was cooking it, I barely kept myself from falling off the couch. Wrapped in the blanket from my bed, I carefully untangled myself so that I could sit up properly. I couldn't remember how I ended up sleeping here. Moving around wasn't easy. My muscles were sore and my head was throbbing. The smell of bacon was both overwhelming and oddly soothing at the same time. Still trying to maneuver myself around the couch and get my bearings, I realized that I had no idea who was the bacon. Ray was speaking to me, but with the pressure in my head it was hard for me to focus on her words. "DY, you are home and Lesia is here with you. Are you okay?" "Am I okay?" I had to think about that for a minute. I was still a little sleepy, but other than the soreness and a headache, I seemed okay. Ray seemed off, but glad that I was awake apparently. Just as I had finally untangled myself and was about to get up, Lesia walked over and handed me a big mug of what smelled like coffee. Grabbing the mug out of her hand, I thanked her as I pulled it close to my face to inspect. I love coffee, but I like it with equal parts cream and sugar to coffee. The contents were a swirling caramel color and there was a hint of coconut coming from the steam. I sighed longingly as I took a deep breath and soaked in the wonderful scent. "Morning," Lesia said tentatively as she sat on the opposite end of the couch from me. She held a mug in her hands and curled her legs up underneath her. Recalling how she had done something similar last night on the chair made me smile. Lesia reminded me more of a cat than a wolf, but I kept that to myself. About to thank her, she put up a hand to stop me from speaking. "Before you say anything, I need to say something to you." "Okay, I'm so sorry," she spit out. "I am so sorry for what happened yesterday. I didn't mean to upset you, or make you angry, or hurt your feelings. I think that my mind was just going so fast that I didn't think about what I was saying and how I was saying it." Well, why I appreciated the apology, I hadn't even fully woken up yet, but as she continued to speak the memories from the previous day filled my head again. So much had happened in such a short amount of time and I honestly haven't really processed any of it. The fact that Lesia was still here meant so much to me. I still wasn't sure when I had fallen asleep, but knowing that she stayed with me was both comforting and a little intimidating. Never having a friend before made this really hard for me to try to navigate. Books and movies were my only sources of information for this situation, but for the life of me I couldn't remember one scenario that would help me out here. So, winging this was my only option. Lesia was gripping her mug with both hands and staring at its contents as if she was waiting for it to do something. I was trying to remember what was the last thing that happened before I ended up passing out, but my mind couldn't recall it. Ray was listening to everything, but oddly enough she was keeping quiet. Whatever reasons she had were really getting under my skin. Ray had been acting so weird lately and I wasn't sure why, and she wasn't telling me much lately. Dylan, I made something to eat. Would you like to have some breakfast with me? I would really like to talk to you if you'd allow it. Even though she was speaking to me, she was still staring at her coffee. Yeah, of course. I would love to. Eat, and talk. I would love to talk with you over breakfast. Lesia seemed to light up. She finally looked up and the smile she wore lit up her face. I didn't know how many friends she had, but with a smile like that, I'm sure that people were just drawn to her. The food she made looked amazing. Lesia ran to the kitchen while I got up carefully with my coffee. When I sat at the table she placed in front of me a plate with bacon, over easy eggs, and the fluffiest pancakes I have ever seen. My stomach growled the second I saw the food, and I had a feeling that it was going to taste amazing. Lesia jumped up on the seat across from me and when I looked around, I noticed that everything was clean. I didn't know what time it was, but Lesia must have woken up much earlier than me. No one has ever shown me such kindness and I really didn't know how to handle this. Conversations were not my forte, but after everything she has done for me, the least I owed her was to try. This food looks amazing. Thank you so much for cooking for me, both last night and right now. No one has ever done anything like that for me. Heat flooded my face and I couldn't look up at her. She said that she wanted to talk, so now it's my turn to try and share a little bit of myself with her. I dug into my food, but still didn't look over to her. The food was even better than I imagined. It was divine. Everything was cooked to perfection and I was lost in my joy when she spoke. Yesterday, my words came out wrong. I wanted to ask about you, your past, your life, and your wolf. I would also like to talk about what happened last night. Would that be okay? Still unable to look at her, I swallowed the lump in my throat and tried to prepare myself for where this may lead. It was too late for me to try to get out of it at this point anyway. Unable to answer her, I nodded and took a huge bite of one piece of bacon. What happened yesterday to make you lose control of your emotions? That question was a lot easier to answer, but as I thought about it, the worry of losing my job came flooding up again. I told her all about what happened and she just took it all in without commenting. We were both quiet for a moment, and then she asked her next question. Why hasn't anyone seen your wolf? I mean, other than the 2 times that I have seen her now. That one was a bit harder to answer. Alpha Rowan had always told me that I needed to keep Ray a secret to protect us, but I wanted to be friends with Lesia and I didn't want to keep secrets from her. I was told that no one would accept her and that others would ask me to leave the pack if they saw that she was different. Again, she listened intently, but didn't react to my words with anything but nods and small grunts. Explaining everything to her felt good. It was nice to share my secrets with someone who actually seemed to care. Sitting quietly for another few moments again, I took the time to drink most of my coffee. I felt her staring at me so I looked up to catch her watching me. What happened to your parents, Dylan? Unfortunately, I did know, but that felt a little too hard to talk about so I just told her the lie that everyone around the pack knows. They were killed in the same battle right after I was born. This time we both looked at each other and there was no pause in her questioning. Why can I link with Ray, but not with you? I wished Ray could help me with this one because I honestly had no idea myself. I don't know. I was told that we couldn't link with anyone because our bonds were broken. That's a lie. Who told you that? She demanded a bit angrily. Ray hadn't said anything the whole time we had been sitting here and I could feel a sense of tension from her, almost as if she was anxious. Dylan, when is your birthday? Well, that wasn't too hard to answer. December 21st. Lesia's eyes widened a bit as she stared at me, but she didn't stop with her questions. What do you plan on doing after school? Will you stay here, in the pack I mean? Well, what else would I do? Of course I would stay here. I mean, I would unless I was forced to leave. The fear of losing my job and my house rose up in my mind again, and I couldn't answer her. Dylan, do you know what happened last night? This time she didn't wait for me to respond. She answered her own question. Someone snuck onto the Packlands. Patrols have been looking for them because that wasn't the first time that they have done it and it seems they have been doing it for some time. Well, this was news to me. It's not like anyone shared anything with me. I didn't have any friends or family to get information from. I think that the reason Alpha Rogan and the others came by is because whoever it is, they're coming to these lands to search for something. For you, and I think he knows it. That's why he is trying to keep you a secret from everyone, including yourself. 16. Dylan. Why would anyone come looking for me? It didn't make any sense. The only people who I knew that I live on the Packlands was the people I work for, but I have never even met them in person before. Even though Lesia sounded so confident, I hated to tell her that she was wrong. No one, and I mean not a single person, has ever shown any real interest in me. Even Alpha Rogan only cared because he didn't want me to bring any unnecessary problems to the pack. Keeping me away from others benefited him just as much as it did me. You are not a mistake or burden that needs to be hidden away from others, Ray whispered softly, but meekly. While her words brought me some relief, they didn't erase all the feelings that I had built up inside about not being good enough to live as a part of the pack. Ray seemed to want to refute my thoughts, but she was oddly silent and tried to fill my mind with loving thoughts instead. Lesia was watching me with a look of expectation mixed with concern. I knew that she could tell that I was trying to talk to Ray and consider what she just told me. Whoever was giving Lesia information on what was going on behind the scenes must be in a position of power, or really close to the alpha. If everyone knew that there was an intruder, the alarms would have gone off last night. Having only known each other for such a short amount of time, I didn't really know much about her. I was done answering questions and thinking about things that made no sense. I have no friends or family, so I think that you are mistaken, or whoever is giving you this information is. My words came out rougher than I had intended, but I did not choose to apologize. She paused with the pancake an inch away from her mouth. I could tell that she was about to say something, but I stopped her by asking my question first. Why are you here, Lesia? Why would someone like you want to be friends with me? There. Let her answer some questions now. I'm not trying to be mean, but I can't be the only one who has to divulge things about myself and put myself out there for others. She let the fluffy pancake fall on her plate, but not in an angry way. As a matter of fact, she seemed excited. The only way that I can describe the onslaught of words that came pouring out of her mouth was by describing a dam bursting forth. Lesia told me her entire life story, or at least that's what it seemed like. She's the oldest of 3, but the only girl. Her parents both work and she helps her mom do everything around the house. Playing sports and trying to get into college are her biggest worries right now, and she has quite a few friends, but she considers them more like acquaintances than real friends. By the time she had finished telling me about her life, I had finished not only all my food and coffee, but I had gotten seconds and finished those too. Around the time she got to what happened with us in the woods outside the school, explaining every time we had been together from her perspective was so enlightening. It seemed like she had been talking for hours when she finally explained what happened yesterday. I showed up to see if you were okay since you suddenly stopped answering your phone, and I found you, well, like that? Heat filled my cheeks because I could only imagine what she walked in on when she showed up. When I followed Ray to the beach and Brea was able to link with her, she instructed her to come her and get things ready after she had taken off to chase that scent. Well, that explains how she ended up being here at my house getting things ready when I walked in. After everything happened after the alpha left your house, you passed out and my mom let me know that there were search parties all over this area. Embarrassment made the heat in my cheeks burn hotter, and I was sure that I looked as red as Ray. I asked her if I could stay with you and she thought it would be a great idea and even sent my little brothers over with some food for me to make for breakfast. Sitting back in her chair seemed like a signal that she was done with story time, and I couldn't help but feel out of breath. So many different thoughts were going through my head. So, your parents are okay that you're here with me? I asked nervously. The smile that spread across her face eased the slight ache that lives in my heart. Yeah, of course they are. I had to bribe my little brothers to keep from staying the night with us though. A laugh that I hadn't expected escaped my throat. The fact that someone wanted to stay with me was new, and a bit exciting. After cleaning everything up, and talking a bit more, we decided that we would go out and do some grocery shopping and have another go at girls' night. The evening went by with lots of food and laughter. I even got to talk on the phone with her brothers, who I found out were twins and who were only a year younger than her. When we were finally getting ready for bed, she decided to ask again what it was that had happened yesterday when she had found me freaking out in my living room. I work for a company in the city and my manager sent me a message at the end of my shift telling me that I have to go in for a mandatory meeting. I thought that she was shocked at the request like I was, and was already worried about what was going to happen to my job, but I hadn't anticipated her response. So, what's the big deal? I don't get it. What do you mean? If they want me to go to the office, they are probably going to fire me. Plus there is no way that Alpha Rogan is going to give me permission to go to the office. Why? She asked, perplexed. We were sitting in my pajamas and she was sitting beside me and braiding my hair, so I had to turn to look at her. They have never asked me to go in, so they must be angry or upset with me. I had turned just enough to look at her, but not so much that she would mess up my hair. No, that's not what I mean. She finished with the braid and grabbed my shoulder to turn me so that I was fully looking at her. Why wouldn't the Alpha let you go to your office? If he already let you have a job, then why wouldn't he let you go in person if needed? Even though her question made sense, I didn't know how to explain to her all of the things that he had warned me about, not only here in the pack, but especially in the human city. There is nothing to be afraid of in the city. We go all the time. My father works for a large company there and my mom likes to go there to go shopping whenever she can. I was so shocked to hear about her parents. I know that many people work in the city, but I didn't know them personally, and the Packlands are so big and we have so much stuff here that many people hardly ever leave. I can go with you when you tell him about this if it makes you feel better. I'll be like your emotional support wolf. I couldn't hold back the laugh and the tears. They were happy tears, of course, but still. These feelings and experiences were new and they were so enjoyable. When we went to bed, I fell into a deep and restful sleep, but not before Ray, who had been so quiet all day, wished me many more days of happiness like this. I secretly wished for them too. I spent the next 2 days with Lesia preparing for my meeting with Alpha Rogan. She decided that we would do role-playing and that I would try different ways to explain to him why I felt that I had to leave the Packlands and how important it was for my professional career. Our meeting was scheduled for tonight and he was going to come here to my house. It worked out well because I could have Lesia here without having to come up with an excuse on why she would accompany me. Deciding that a short, truthful explanation would be the best way to approach the topic, I ran through every different scenario and how to combat any refusal. When he finally arrived, it was already late in the afternoon and I was ready, or as ready as I could ever be. At first, I could tell that he was a little annoyed to find that Lesia was here with me again, but I couldn't understand why. He was wearing a suit, but his tie was sticking out of his pocket, so I knew that I would be his last stop before heading home. I decided that we should sit in the living room and try to get this over with as soon as possible. So, what is it that you need to discuss with me, Dylan? And shouldn't you have let me know if you would have a guest with you for this meeting? Shit, I had a feeling that I should have told him about Lesia before he showed up, but I was afraid that he would have made me ask her to leave. Privacy was one of the most important things that he had always drilled into me, but I was so happy for this new friendship with Lesia, I honestly never wanted her to leave. Apologies, Alpha Rogan. She has been spending quite a bit of time with me lately and I thought it would be okay. I apologize for not letting you know in advance. While he sat comfortably on the end of the couch, I could tell that he was upset by the way he held himself. Just explain to me what you need. I had a feeling that it was urgent, so I made plans to come as soon as I could. I needed to just get on with it. Having him actually sitting here in my house was making me lose my nerve. If I didn't get the words out now, I would probably end up swallowing them up and forgetting them. I received a request to go to the office for a meeting with my manager and I wanted to run it by you for permission. When I said that word, Lesia immediately looked from me to Alpha Rogan. I honestly didn't need permission from anyone. I was 17, about to graduate, and I already lived on my own. But, Alpha Rogan had been the one who took care of me in his own way, and he essentially was the one who would allow or prevent me from doing, well, anything. Alpha Rogan rose to his feet the moment the words were out of my mouth. I watched as he did his best to hold in his anger, but I could tell from the way that he flexed his fingers that he was trying to calm himself. When did you receive this request? Well, he hadn't come out and just said no, so I explained everything to him. I received the message at the end of my shift 2 days ago, but I forgot to ask you earlier because of what happened that night. Yes, he knew exactly what happened that night, in fact he was here that night too. Who sent the request, Dylan? I explained that to him as well, but I could see that he was furious that they made the request directly to me and that this was the first time that he was hearing about it. I will have to talk to Xavier and then I will get back to you. If that is all for tonight, I will leave you two to enjoy yourselves. He walked over to the door and was about to leave when he asked me to follow him outside for a moment. I turned back to look at Lesia, who gave me 2 thumbs up when Alpha Rogan's back was turned and he was striding out of the house. He stopped a few steps away from my porch and I walked over to him but stood about an arm's length away. It was dark outside, and if anyone was around, it would be hard to make us out in the shadow of the tree we stood next to. Dylan, I want you to be careful with your new friend. Don't you think that it's odd that she suddenly wants to be your friend after she saw Ray? He reached out a hand and placed it on my shoulder and pulled me into a slight hug. I was so shocked by his words that I let him. I will meet you once I have made a decision about this, but next time you will be alone, he growled in my ear. When he turned to walk away, I could do nothing but stay right there. While I thought that his words were ones of concern, they hurt so much. All they brought with them was the doubt that I began feeling that he wanted to plant. 17. Aaron. The days were flying by and this little break would soon be over, but I was determined to try to enjoy what little time I could get alone on these patrols. No matter how many wolves we had out the other night, none of them had been able to find who had crossed our border. The punishment that everyone received was a monetary reduction in their salaries, but since I was an unpaid patrol member, I received 10 lashings. It had been 2 days now and my wounds were almost completely gone. Dane was finally starting to talk to me, but just a little. I knew he felt bad about my punishments, but there was nothing either of us could really do about it. The patrols were now made up of 2 or more in groups that would cover a 5-mile area. Even though I was still younger than most of the guards in the patrol, I ended up getting paired with only one other. Brian was a young guard who was trying to work his way through the patrol unit and up into the higher ranks of the guard. I felt a little bad at first for leaving him to patrol on his own, but I'm so glad that I did. We had agreed to run in opposite directions and make trips cutting through our patrol area, but I couldn't help but widen my area to get closer to where I knew she lived. The other night had been one of the best and worst of my life. Being able to be around Dylan and encountering her wolf were beyond wonderful, but having to experience her with my uncle was so frustrating. Dylan had always just been another girl, another wolf, someone of no consequence to me, but when my mother died and my uncle became my guardian, things completely changed. At first he would ask me about her in simple conversations when we were at home. Eventually it evolved into following her and making sure that she wouldn't talk with anyone in school. When I was younger, it was easy to fall into the different roles that he wanted me to play. I was eager to please him and hear his praises for following his orders. It wasn't until one day I came upon her crying in the woods that things began to change. Dane had insisted on going for a run and we happened upon her far from the pack house and the orphanage. There was no way that she knew that we were near her, because there was no way that she would have let anyone, especially me, see her like that. I had seen people cry before, I'd even cried before, but the way that she cried and sobbed, and asked why the gods had forsaken her was different. It was like nothing I had ever seen or heard before. Dane sat there and we watched her the entire time she wept. At that moment, I realized that I had been at least some fuel for her despair and I began to hate not only myself, but my uncle. What could she have done to make him want her treated like that? I had my first shift at 14 and I knew that I was one of the first people in my age group to get my wolf. I'm sure that she never imagined that I, or better yet, Dane would be out here watching her. As she sat there on the cold, cool ground, I watched her small body tremble and shake with the force of the sobs. Her long auburn hair fell over her face and hid her soft ivory cheeks. The urge to go over and comfort her began to grow the longer we sat there, and I wasn't sure if it had come from Dane or me, but the urge only grew the longer we watched. Dylan cried so long and so hard that after a time, she ended up passing out right there in the dirt. I hadn't brought any clothes with me, and I was oddly grateful for that, because if I had them, I would have shifted and taken her home with me. The moment those thoughts had filled my mind, I had resolved that I would talk to my uncle and refuse to do anything to bring any further pain to this poor girl. Honestly, I knew so little about her since she had no friends and didn't really associate with anyone, well ever. We stayed watching her until she eventually awoke towards the late afternoon, and Dane had followed her from a distance, as she went to the orphanage. That night was the first time that my uncle had one of his guards discipline me for insubordination. When I had approached him about Dylan, I had at first thought he was in a bad mood about something that might have happened earlier in the day. But after I explained to him what I had seen, he laughed at me for being so weak-hearted and took me out of the secret exit from his office to the barracks. That night was the first, but definitely not the last time that he had used his guards or Mark to teach me a lesson and try to put me in my place. Not once did he ever explain to me anything about Dylan or why he wanted her to be secluded. After that night, I went to him a week later and told him that I refused to hurt that girl anymore. This time he didn't punish me for my words. Instead, the next day at school he had instructed someone to beat up Dylan on her way to school, and when she showed up, she was so bloody that it looked like she had barely survived the attack. Later that evening, after I had eaten dinner with my aunt and uncle, he had asked me to join him for a walk. Uncle Rogan asked if I enjoyed seeing what disobedience looked like. In that moment, I realized that he had given the orders to have someone do that to Dylan to show me just how much worse someone would hurt her. My uncle had trapped me into being Dylan's foe because I had been stupid enough to show him a slight weakness. For a time, I was angry at everyone. At her, myself, my uncle, but I knew that anger would do no good. There was no one stronger than the alpha of this pack, and he would get what he wanted one way or another. Resolving myself to having to live out this life until I was old enough to finally leave was the only thing that helped me get through every day here. As time went on, I learned how to make Dylan's life hell without physically causing her pain. It became a challenge to figure out how to cause her trouble without actually hurting her. I knew that even though the things my so-called friends and I said and did to her still caused her emotional pain, the fact that no one was causing her physical damage was the only sense of relief I found. Dane would insist that we try to keep her safe in the only way that we could, and even though he knew that we had no choice in the matter, he began to lash out at me. One day Dane considered looking into Dylan's past to try and find out what her parents could have done to bring the wrath of my uncle down on her. I snuck into his office and went through everything I could find with her name on it, but I came up empty-handed. The next thing I did was follow him and his guards when they went to go and see her. It was odd to find out that he made frequent visits to see her when she lived in the orphanage. We were able to do that for a short time, until one day Noel caught us. Though he didn't report us to my uncle, he explained that Dylan had been relocated and I needed to make sure that I never followed my uncle again. Noel was one of my uncle's faithful personal guards, but in all the time I had known him I could tell that he didn't fully agree to my punishments, or the instructions to harass Dylan. I knew that she still lived on the pack lands, but he made Dane promise to never follow her home. The poor girl needed to be able to feel safe somewhere, and I didn't want to ruin that for her. When she shifted in her wolf that first time, I was struck stupid, and when I came across her again, it took everything in me to not crumble to my feet and bow down before her. Dylan was gorgeous, and when I saw her wolf, I knew that she was not just magnificent, she seemed like if she was made of, well, of magic. There was an aura about her that I had never encountered before, and something about it made me want to just be in her presence. Shame flooded through me when I saw how aggressive that her wolf had responded to me, and I wished that I could have explained everything to her in that moment, but I knew that nothing could justify my actions. When my uncle told me that we would be going to Dylan's house, I was elated because I wanted to see where she now lived, but I was so worried that he would do something to make me harm her, or worse, have one of the others hurt her. I was on edge the entire time we were in her small comfortable house. I never thought that I would feel comfortable in such a small place after living in the massive pack house, but I had been so wrong. Everything about her house was warm and inviting. The small touches all around the living area made it apparent that this was her home. I was so envious and happy for her that I had almost forgotten who I was there with. With everything going on that night, I had almost forgotten that we were supposed to be hunting someone, and when I realized just how close they had come to Dylan, I was flustered and distracted in trying to figure out how to keep her safe from yet another person wanting to possibly harm her. It was so hard to leave her home that night, but Dane and I were spurred on with the desire to keep her safe from the outside threat. We had searched until dawn to find the intruder, but it was a fruitless endeavor. Every day after that I had figured out a way to come and check on her, and I was glad to find Lesia with her on each and every occasion. I knew that they had just recently become friends, but seeing her happy filled me with so much joy. Dane looked forward to our patrol tonight so that we could come out and see her yet again. I knew that he was fond of Dylan's wolf and was looking for an opportunity to finally meet her. When we were just a few yards away from Dylan's house, we caught the familiar scent of my uncle, and immediately Dane went on alert. He crept around in the dark and tried to stay as quiet as possible. My uncle's beast was a force of nature and he knew that if we got too close he would sense us. We finally caught sight of them emerging from Dylan's house and watched as she had followed him a ways away near some large trees. Neither of us could make out what they were saying, but I watched her flinch as he pulled her towards him and whispered something to her. Dane was livid and it took all the words I could think of to urge him to stay hidden and observe their little interaction. In that moment, I decided that no matter what happens next, I will figure out a way to keep Dylan safe from whatever my uncle has planned for her. I would find out what my uncle wanted or needed her for if it's the last thing I do. 18. Dylan. Never in my life have I been so uncomfortable. The clothes that I had let Lesia talk me into wearing were really nice, but I had never worn anything so, well, mature before, so they made me feel off. As I sat here waiting for Alpha Rogan to come and pick me up, I couldn't help but go over how I ended up getting here. After our little talk about going into the office, things seemed to move pretty quickly. Only a day had passed from the time I mentioned it to the time it was planned. Before I knew it, I received a text saying that not only was I going to the city for the first time tomorrow, I was scheduled to meet with my boss. The most shocking part about it was that I wasn't going alone. I would be accompanied by the Alpha himself. His text was short, but had very strict instructions about what time he would pick me up and what the schedule looked like. I probably read that message 100 times before I ended up calling Lesia and completely freaking out. The shriek that Lesia let out when I told her the news almost burst my eardrums, but it was obvious that she was smiling just as big as I was at that moment. It was so nice having a friend. The last few days of my life have been so full of things I never thought I would get to experience. By the time she had finally gotten through all of her shock and excitement, she immediately jumped into planning what I would wear for my do or die meeting, as she so kindly labeled it. I had a shift that day, so she and I made plans for her to come over that night and help me figure out what I would wear, how I would do my hair, and she insisted she would teach me how to put on makeup. All the excitement from my call with Lesia followed me into my shift. The time flew by so quickly, and before I knew it my time was almost up. With only a few minutes left, I remembered that I needed to respond to the message that Roanne had sent me. After double-checking my message from Alpha Rogan, I messaged him what time to expect me tomorrow. As I sent the message, I felt the sudden flutter in my stomach because I was still so unsure as to why they wanted to see me, but Ray immediately began whispering words of encouragement. My phone went off and I knew before checking it that it was Lesia telling me that she was on her way. I had told her what time my shift ended and I'm sure that she was counting down the time before she could come over. Before I was about to submit the last of my assignments for the day, the familiar bing of an incoming message sounded and a notification popped up on the screen. The response from Roanne was a voice message. I was so thrown off that I immediately clicked on it to hear what he had to say. I am eagerly awaiting the opportunity to finally meet the illustrious and elusive Dylan Solemeyer in the flesh. So until tomorrow, good evening. What the actual F***ck? Maybe I shouldn't have listened to his message because now I had more than just flutters in my stomach. I had full-on pterodactyls in there. Quickly clocking out, I left the message open because I had to play it again for Lesia when she arrived. Unable to calm myself, I spoke to Ray. Is it just me, or was that kinda weird? I mean, that was weird, right? I almost didn't give her time to respond because the moment I asked the questions, I started responding to myself. Maybe he's just excited to meet me, right? I mean, I have worked here for quite a while and I've never met anyone. That is probably really weird, right? Yeah, it's just that this is a weird situation. Ray had to almost yell to get my attention. Little one, please take a moment to breathe. Things will be okay. She was right, probably. I just needed to take a second to catch my breath and calm my nerves. I didn't need to get into my head and let my emotions get the best of me. Deciding to take a quick shower to see if that could help me calm my nerves, I texted Lesia to let her know that the door was unlocked for her and that she could just come right in. I grabbed whatever was on the top of my hamper and practically ran for the shower. Jumping under the water before it even warmed up enough was probably not the best idea, but it helped me to focus a little better. The warm water washed over me and I tried to imagine that all my worries and nerves were being washed away with it. While I was standing in the shower just letting the water run down my face, I thought that I heard the door open. I figured that it was Lesia, so I tried to finish washing up as quickly as I could so that she wouldn't have to wait for too long. It probably took me about 5 minutes to finish up. I dressed in shorts and an oversized shirt and wrapped my hair up in a towel on the top of my head. Lesia, is that you? I called as I walked out of the bathroom, but there was no response. I went to the living room and looked around. I could have sworn that I heard the door open. For some reason Ray was on edge, but she wouldn't tell me what was bothering her. I brushed it off as my nerves rubbing off on her. Grabbing my phone, I went into the kitchen to grab something to drink. The moment I was about to dial Lesia's number, there was a loud knock on the door. Thank goodness that I decided to shower because it had soothed all the nerve endings in my body, and I bounded to the door to let Lesia in. Surprise was probably written on my face when I opened the door to not just Lesia, who was holding an obscene amount of bags, but two tall blonde-headed boys with piercing green eyes who had clothes draped across their outstretched arms. Dylan, these are my adorable little brothers Cruz and Nico. Boys, this is my bestie Dylan. I wish that I would have known that she was going to be introducing me to her brothers, because then I would have worn something better, like a bra. Hopefully, they hadn't noticed how oddly I was standing to try to hide the fact that I wasn't wearing one. Both boys were making faces at Lesia's poorly hidden jab at them, but when they greeted me they were polite as ever. It is a pleasure to meet you. It's nice to finally meet you, Dylan. Though they were younger than me, they were practically the same height as most adult males, and I had to admit that they were very handsome young men. Yes, it is really nice to meet you. I have heard so much about you both. I gushed. Don't believe a word of what Lily says, they responded in unison. The laugh that escaped me was short and squeaky because I had tried to hold it in. I have read about how twins do things in perfect unison before, but hearing it firsthand was absolutely great. Realizing that they were still standing outside with all of their luggage, I welcomed them inside. To my surprise, one of the many bags that Lesia was carrying contained a full 3-course meal that her mother had prepared. She said that she had to send food if you were going to have to suffer through all of her children for the evening. Even though I hadn't met Lesia's parents yet, I could tell that her mom was a really sweet person. Her brothers were still standing in the middle of the living room and holding piles of clothes in their arms. Oh my gosh, please put those on the couch and take a seat anywhere you'd like. Both boys walked over to the couch, but before they could dump their loads, Lesia rushed them. Don't you dare wrinkle those damn clothes. She made them follow her to my bedroom, and she placed all of the clothes carefully on the bed. I was a little nervous having all of them in my bedroom. It felt a little too intimate, but the second they had all the clothes down, they met me back in the living room. Lesia was so hyped up that she couldn't do anything but pace back and forth around my little house. Her brothers sat at my table and I could see them looking around and taking in my little house. I had to stop myself from outright gawking at them. Being able to see the resemblance in the three of them, and watch their dynamic play out in front of me, made me ache a little to not know what that feels like. Shaking it off, I continued to unpack all of the food and plate it for the 4 of us. Lesia's mom had sent over a Caesar salad, grilled chicken with butter noodles, and a whole container of walnut brownies. We talked while we ate and I got to know a lot more, not only about her brothers, but about Lesia. Even though the 3 of them bickered, the love they had for each other was obvious. But the moment we had all finished eating, Lesia rushed me to my bedroom and slammed the door. She immediately categorized the clothes and had me start trying them all on. Cruz and Nico were both judges and helped rate the outfits. After a while it turned into a game where the 3 of them would rate the outfits on a scale from 1 to 10. Finally we had the outfits narrowed down to 2 and we were going to be moving on to the hair and makeup portion of the evening apparently. Lesia was setting up her station on the table while I made some drinks for us all. When I was in the kitchen, one of Lesia's brothers, I couldn't tell them apart just yet, asked if anyone else lived here. Even though I was a little taken off guard, I quickly responded to him, no, why do you ask? Both boys looked at each other for a moment and I couldn't tell if they were talking to each other or their wolves, but Lesia immediately jumped in. What's going on with you two? Why would you ask something like that? Again Nico and Cruz seemed to be having a private conversation, but Lesia walked over and smacked them both on the heads. Hey, what the hell was that for? They yelled in unison. I brought the tea service to the living room and found a small section of the table to safely place it. It's faint, like really faint, but there is another scent I'm picking up in here. Did you have a guest today? Thank goodness I had put the tea down because I would have probably dropped it if it had still been in my hands. What do you mean? I don't smell anything, and neither did Ray. Lesia was sniffing so hard that it was almost funny, but Nico, I think, placed a hand on her arm to get her to stop. Do you want to call the patrols and have them come investigate? He asked me. Honestly, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I asked Ray if she smelled or sensed anything out of the ordinary, but she just said that she didn't. Lesia had her phone out, but I knew that if we called them, Alpha Rogan would not only make them all leave, he would shut down the Packlands, and our trip tomorrow. I made a quick decision and asked, would you all mind staying here with me tonight, and after my trip tomorrow, I'll tell Alpha Rogan all about this and see what he wants to do then. 3 sets of beautifully white teeth smiled up at me and all 3 nodded and responded with their agreements. Duh, of course. Yes, sounds like fun. I thought we were already planning to stay. I had to hold back my tears. Lesia rushed me and practically tackled me with the bear hug she wrapped me in. We spent the rest of the night going over hairstyles and after a little bit of experimentation decided on a minimal amount of makeup. By the time we had made a bed for her brothers and Lesia and I jumped in my bed, I had completely forgotten about the message I had wanted to show her. The morning passed by so quickly and I found myself in a button-up white blouse, underneath a burgundy pin-striped vest. I wore tapered black trousers and a pair of burgundy loafers because I could not walk in heels. Lesia had applied mascara, lip gloss, and filled in my eyebrows, but kept my hair styled in an elegant bun with a braided headband. Her and her brothers left about 10 minutes before Alpha Rogan was supposed to show up, but not before they had given me a million compliments. Nervous anxiety filled me, but I was as ready as I would ever be. I decided to wait in the living room for him. As I sat there I asked Ray if she was excited to visit the city. She deliberated for a moment before she spoke. Dylan, I need you to stay on your guard when we are there. Be aware of everything and everyone, especially Alpha Rogan. No matter what happens, remember I am always here with you. I had no time to process her words because the moment she stopped talking, I heard the tires of a car pull up outside. Well, here goes nothing. 19. Dylan. The moment that I heard the tires of a car pull up outside I immediately got up and started walking for the door. I can do this, I can do this, I chanted over and over again as I tried to steady my heart. As soon as I opened the door, VIT was standing on the small porch about to knock. I gave him a shy smile. Morning sir, I said as I nodded towards him. A small smile played across his face as he nodded in return. I approached the large black SUV. It was a bit intimidating with its dark black windows that made it impossible to see inside, but I'm sure that it was for protection, so I drew in a deep breath and stood to my full height. VIT appeared right next to me and quickly reached out to open the door for me. I glanced over at him and soft whispered, "Thank you so much." He didn't reply, but he gave me the quickest little wink and I couldn't help but smile in response. The moment the door to the car opened, it took a second for me to be able to see inside as it was pretty dark in there as well, but I saw Alpha Rogan was already seated in the back and I would have to sit next to him. "Well, don't you clean up nicely, Dylan," the Alpha purred in a husky tone. Ray's words or warning, or whatever they were, went through my head. Even though she was silent, I felt a warm sensation as if she was confirming my thoughts. "Thank you, Alpha. I borrowed the clothes from Lesia. I wanted to make a good impression." I thought that his eyes had flashed a different color for a second, but it was so dark in the car that I wasn't 100% sure that's what I saw. VIT was next to me again the second I got settled in the seat, and he was reaching over me to help me get a buckle secured around my chest. While I've been in a car before, it wasn't often, so I was thankful for his assistance even though it felt odd to be this close to him. Once VIT had made sure that I was secured, he closed my door and got into the front seat right in front of me. I quickly looked to the person in the driver's seat and was pleasantly surprised to see Noel. He didn't turn to greet me, but instead moved a little mirror that was attached to the ceiling of the car. When he turned it, he was able to see me in its reflection. When I met his eyes, he said, "Mornin' little miss, are you ready for this little trip?" Taken aback by not only his demeanor, but the kindness in his voice, I couldn't help but smile in response. "As ready as I'm ever going to be," I remarked with a soft smile of my own. Just then, VIT cleared his throat and I caught the two of them glance at each other, and then Noel turned the mirror back to its original position. As we pulled away from my little house and headed toward the eastern gate, I felt my stomach doing little flips. The drive to the gates was longer than I anticipated, but the silence in the car made the time feel like it was passing extremely slowly. I stared out the window at all the things we passed on our way. Since this was the busiest entrance to the Packlands, there wasn't much near this side of the border, other than the training grounds and one of the old barracks. As we approached the gates, I could feel my heartbeat steadily speed up. The gates were much different than I remembered them. There was a large glass box that two members of the patrol sat in, and when we approached they waved us over to them. One of the guards, an older silver-haired man, walked over to Noel's window. I didn't see what he pressed, but I heard a soft click and then his window started to roll down. The older guard chanced through the car, and when our eyes met I saw the look of surprise for a split second before he fixed his expression. Noel informed him of where we were headed and our estimated time of return. "Sir," he snapped out as he stood straight and pressed his right fist to his chest. Noel nodded at him and hit another button, I assumed, and the window began to rise. The guard still stood there, but he had taken a step back and watched as we passed through the now open gate. The moment I heard the gate close being us with its loud thud, I physically jumped. A soft chuckle escaped Alpha Rogan and my attention immediately turned to him. He was watching me so intently that I wasn't sure if he was really the one who had laughed. "Relax, Dylan, I can hear your heart racing from over here." Well, of course he could. I'm sure as the Alpha he had sharper senses than any of us. I forced myself to take a deep breath in through my nose and hold it for a moment before exhaling. "Good girl," he said before he reached out his hand and placed it on my knee. It took everything I had not to flinch at the sudden contact and keep trying to focus on my breathing. "It's only natural that you would be nervous leaving the Packlands for the first time, but try to enjoy it." He softly squeezed my knee, and even though I'm sure he was trying to comfort me, all it did was unnerve me and put Ray on edge. I knew how fast those hands could go from soft and soothing to hard and painful, so I nodded at him and continued to breathe deeply. Watching out the window seemed like a better option than staring at any of the other guests in the vehicle. I tried to take in the scenery that seemed to be flying past the window. One thing that I wished I would have done before leaving today was look up how far away the office was from the Packlands. I didn't even realize that I had no idea how long it would take us to get to the city. We drove for what seemed like 10 minutes or so until we finally turned onto a larger road. After driving down this road, I started to see signs that had images of all kinds of restaurants, shops, and places to sleep. Eventually I noticed that there were other cars on the road around us. The first car that we went beside had passengers in the back row, and I could see them staring at our vehicle trying to see who was inside. At first I jumped back because I wasn't sure if I was allowed to be seen by anyone else. Noel spoke before I even noticed what I had done. "No one can see ya, little miss. These windows have an octane tint on 'em, so don't worry about window watching." Even though he hadn't moved the mirror to watch me, I could see him in the angle of the mirror and he had a small grin on his face. I spoke to him before I even thought better of it. "Is that why we took this car? So that no one would see that I was with you all?" A look of concern flashed across his face before Alpha Rogan squeezed the knee that he was still holding, and I looked away. All of the vehicles that we use for official business off of Packlands have this type of tinting on them. It is both for protection and privacy. It has nothing to do with the fact that we are escorting you today. Alpha Rogan caressed my knee with his thumb as he spoke, but I was just glad that he didn't squeeze hard enough to inflict pain. Nodding to his statement to show my understanding, I turned my attention back to the window. My head was starting to hurt a bit and the flips in my stomach had turned to uncomfortable tremors. I didn't want to mess up the hair that Lesia had worked so hard on, but I pressed my hand to my forehead and softly rubbed my temples with my thumb and middle finger. I was feeling a little sweaty and nauseated. Are you feeling unwell, Dylan? Alpha Rogan asked softly. I wanted to tell him no, but the second I stopped the rubbing my head felt sore and the worse the nausea would get. I am not sure. I'm a bit sweaty and my head and stomach hurt a bit, I replied without moving my hand. Immediately after I finished speaking I felt a sudden blast of cool air from above my head. Dylan, you need to sit back and try not to keep your eyes closed. Look out the window and drink this. Someone was shoving a cool bottle of water in my hands, but I wasn't sure who it was. I sat up straighter in my seat and angled my body towards the door. This position helped me to focus out the window and removed Alpha Rogan's hand from my leg finally. I took a big drink of the water and breathed deeply from my nose. The temperature of the car was dropping significantly and it felt so good. I pressed my forehead up against the glass and despite the bright sun shining outside, the glass was cool. Ma'am, I think you may be experiencing motion sickness, VIT stated stiffly but not rudely. I'm sure he was probably right, but that didn't make me feel any better. If anything, I felt worse. We have about 30 minutes until we get to the building, little miss. If you try to take a nap that might help you. I knew without turning that this was Noel speaking now by the mannerisms he used. Funny how I was already getting so used to him in such a short amount of time. But no matter, I didn't want to be seen as some troublesome little girl. I chugged more of the water and practically finished the whole bottle before I realized it. I felt my face flush a little, but I was already feeling a bit better. No, I think I'm feeling better. I'll just focus on looking outside and enjoying all the different sights. I didn't turn to look to see if he was making any type of faces at me this time. The longer we drove, the more there was to see around us and I noticed that he was now driving in the far right lane and it made it easier to see my surroundings. After a few minutes, VIT and Noel started pointing out different buildings and shops and giving me brief rundowns on what they were, what they sold, and if they were owned by humans or wolves. To my surprise, humans and wolves were more entwined with each other than I had ever anticipated. According to their synopsis, there were many humans who knew of our existence and willingly dealt with our kind. Still, the other thing that was interesting was that not all of the wolves dealing with humans in the city were from our pack. It seems that there are a few packs near us who also have dealing in this city as well. Before I knew it, I had completely forgotten about the motion sickness and was hanging on to almost every word that my two tour guides were providing me. During this time Alpha Rogan had been on his phone a few times because I could hear him clicking away next to me, but I never turned back to look at him to confirm anything. Right when I was going to ask for information about the large multi-story luxury building that we were nearing, Noel informed us, we are nearing the company, and it seems that they are expecting us. There is a group outside the main doors. The only building near us was the sleek glass building I was curious about, so that must be Aspen Communication Corporate Office. I was immediately impressed and intimidated. Just from the look of the outside of the building I felt like I had no business working for such a grand company. Honestly, seeing just the outside of the building makes me question why they even hired someone like me. Noel eventually turned off of the main road we had been driving down and he immediately approached a type of guard station. This one was much bigger than the east gate of the Packlands. Armed guards could be seen through the window and the man who approached our vehicle was completely bald and wore dark black gear from head to toe. His black sunglasses hid his eyes and I couldn't even guess how old he was. Once we passed through the gate, I could see the small group who were assembled in front of the large glass doors. Men and women in suits were lined up on the steps and as we approached my nausea came flaring back to life. Noel drove a little ways past the assembled group and pulled into a visitor parking space. I wished for a mirror to see if my makeup still looked alright. Noel and VIT were the first ones out of the car, but the moment they closed the door Alpha Rogan reached out and pulled me towards him with so much force I almost fell off the seat. Do not do or say anything that will jeopardize the pack. Don't speak unless spoken to, and do not leave my side unless either Noel or VIT are with you. Do you understand? The pressure from his fingertips was so intense I knew that he would leave a bruise, but since I wore a long-sleeved blouse I knew that no one would see any marks. I understand, Alpha, I whispered. The moment the words left my mouth he stared at me for a moment longer before he tapped on the window and both our doors were opened. VIT held the door for me, and I saw him watch me as I fixed my shirt where it had been rumpled from Alpha Rogan's grip. He waited for me to adjust my pants as well and to my surprise he leaned in and whispered, "You look very presentable." Maybe it wasn't much of a compliment, but it made my heart swell. No one ever said things like that to me. VIT closed the door behind me and I followed him to the other side of the car. Alpha Rogan and Noel had already started walking towards the front of the building to the group of people gathered there. I trailed a few steps behind him, and tried to appear more confident than I felt. Most of the people looked as if they were much older than me, and I was sure they were gathered to greet Alpha Rogan. A tall silver-haired man in a navy blue suit stood at the bottom of the steps. Even though his hair made him look older, his features seemed youthful, but I couldn't see his eyes from this far. The moment we stood before their little group, Alpha Rogan strode forward. "Good morning. It's a pleasure to meet you all. I am Rogan Blura." Alpha Rogan extended his hand in greeting to the man who looked to be in charge, but to my surprise he was looking past the Alpha, straight at me. From this close I could see that this man was just a few years older than I was. He had striking blue eyes that matched perfectly with his suit. I wasn't ready for the cocky smile he threw me or what he did next. The man reached out his hand and patted Alpha Rogan on the left shoulder and slightly moved around him. When he was right in front of me, he extended his hand as he said, "It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Ms. Dylan Solemeyer. I am Roanne Winters." 20. Dylan. Oh my gods. There is absolutely no way that this man is Mr. Winters. I couldn't understand how or why he would have been out here with all of these other people just waiting for me. I was sure that this was a mistake, on my part somehow. The man who was still standing in front of me with his hand outstretched was looking at me in a way that made me feel inconsequential, to say the least. Awestruck, I see. Maybe this is why we keep you holed up in some secret location. He chastised, all the while still holding his hand out for me to eventually shake it, grab it, something. It was like my brain didn't work or something. Glancing from his outstretched hand to his face, and then back again was the only thing I could do. Giving me one of the most mischievous smiles I've ever seen, he reached out and grabbed my hand from my side. I thought he was going to shake it, but instead he brought it up to his mouth, and kissed the back of it. He was much closer to me now, so when he whispered, I could hear him perfectly. "I am beyond impressed by your reaction. My ego is soaring to new heights. Maybe I should give you a raise for that alone." Still unable to fully comprehend what was going on, I uttered, "It's nice to meet you. Are you really my boss?" The laughter that erupted from not only him, but a few others around us, only made me feel that much more uncomfortable. When I looked at the small group around us, I noticed that there was a few in the crowd who didn't laugh, or smile, for that fact. Alpha Rogan and was one of those who seemed extremely unimpressed with this entire display. I tried to keep from making eye contact with him because I did not have the ability to handle him right now. The moment Roanne started speaking, I focused my attention back to him. He had already released my hand, but was still standing very close to me. "My apologies if I have disappointed you in any way, but I am in fact your boss." Even though his words sounded apologetic, the look on his face seemed proud to the point of looking arrogant. To say that I was uncomfortable was an understatement. I have never been put into a situation where I was the center of attention except when I was being bullied. Those same feelings of being inadequate started to rise in my mind, but Ray was right there to try to quell those thoughts. "You are here for the meeting they requested. Do not let your thoughts overtake you. Let's find out what they want to know." Taking a deep breath, I adjusted the hem of the vest and smoothed my hands down the front of the blouse. Steadying my voice, I replied, "Please forgive my rudeness. I was just nervous to be meeting you like this. I bowed my head towards him, and the moment I did, he reached out his hand and tilted my chin up towards him. "None of that, Ms. Solemeyer," he said more sternly than any way he has previously spoken today. But the second my eyes met his, he smiled at me, and it seemed that he was a genuinely kind man. Alpha Rogan approached and stood right next to me. Placing his hand on my shoulder, he directed his next words to Roanne. "Now that this little introduction is over, where is Xavier? We have a meeting scheduled." Roanne's eyes instantly went from the Alpha's hand to my face and then back to Alpha Rogan. The smile was gone, and two of the attendants that had been a few steps away immediately joined him. "Yes, Rogan, right? Xavier is about to finish with a board meeting, and these gentlemen here will show you and your attendants to his office." The two men who has approached looked around Alpha Rogan's age, and both were dressed in well-cut black suits. They looked almost like bodyguards rather than employees of the company, but what did I know? VIT and Noel were standing right behind us, and when I turned my attention towards them I noticed that they both had little black earpieces in their right ears. At first I wasn't sure why they would need them, but remembered that when we were around humans we had to remember to act like them. "That sounds great," Alpha Rogan responded to him, but before he began to follow after them he squeezed my shoulder and informed Roanne, "I will be leaving one of my men to accompany Dylan." VIT walked closer to Alpha Rogan and they both turned to follow the two men, but Roanne spoke to me, and it was obvious that his words were intended for the Alpha. "You must be very precious to someone if they insist that you are accompanied by a guard while you are here." Alpha Rogan stopped mid-step, but didn't immediately turn. I was terrified of how quickly this might escalate, and when I looked at VIT, his jaw was clenched so tightly that I knew someone was probably linking with him. The cool expression on Alpha Rogan's face made my heart race, but since it wasn't directed at me, I tried not to let it get under my skin. His words, however, threw me for a loop. "She is more important than you will ever know, so yes, we will leave her with a guard." What the actual F***ck? What did he mean by that? Did he say that to Roanne just to make a point? The questions were rolling through my head, but I made sure to keep my facial expression in check, and though I wished I could speak them aloud, I held them all in. Ray, on the other hand, was practically screaming in my head, "You lie so well, you piece of sh**t. When he turned back to follow his two guides to the office of Xavier, I was left with Roanne, Noel, and a handful of people who were all looking at me like I was some oddity. Trying to seem unfazed by the little exchange just now, I turned to Roanne and asked, "What type of meeting am I to be having today, sir?" Roanne Winters was a very handsome man, and with that smirk on his face he looked like one of the male characters from the damn romance novels I like to read so much. "Well, it seems that there are quite a few things that we need to discuss with you, Ms. Solemeyer. Please follow me to my office." Nervous anxiety started to fill me as I considered what this meeting might be about. I was almost positive that they were not going to fire me now, but I had no real idea what they needed to go over with me that couldn't have been done via phone or email. The moment that Roanne turned to walk into the building, Noel motioned for me to follow, and I heard his steps just a few paces behind me. The rest of the little group all trailed a bit further behind. I was right to think that this building was nice on the outside, but I was nowhere near ready to see the interior. The moment we walked through the doors I thought we had walked into a different world. Everything about the building was exquisite, from the stone floors, to the breathtaking staircase that seemed to lead up to every floor, to the ceilings that had all types of vegetation hanging from them. Everywhere one looked there was something spectacular to see, and it took Noelle nudging me from behind to realize that I had stopped walking completely. "Ah yes, I forget that this is your first time coming to the office. It seems that you like the look of it," Rowan asked from a bit further ahead of me than he had been moments ago. "Yes, it is really beautiful. I have never seen anything like it before." While this was true, it all hit me so hard because I've never seen anything outside the Packlands before. Rowan had stopped walking and seemed as if he was waiting for me to catch up to him before we went any further. As I got closer to his side, he started to point out and explain different things about the building and its design. For just a few moments I was lost in the explanations that he was giving about all the different art pieces and the benefits of having some of the different types of plants inside of the building. When we got to the back wall of the building, a large mirror slid to the side and I realized that it was actually the doors to an elevator. Wow, that is so cool. I hadn't even realized I let that slip out until someone from behind us snickered. Rowan held out his hand against the end of the opening. "Ladies first," he said as he motioned me through with his other hand. Noelle walked in right after me, but as soon as he did, Rowan turned to the others and told them, "You all can take the stairs," before he walked in and hit a button on the inside of the panel. I've been in elevators before at the Packlands. Some of the buildings have them, but none of them compared to this one. The moment we went up past the first floor, the back panel, which was glass, showed the city beyond. I was in awe and quickly moved to the back of the elevator and practically pushed myself up against the glass to see everything. It was still pretty early in the morning and I was able to see for quite a distance the higher up we went. "How many floors is this building?" I asked without even turning to look at Rowan. I didn't want to miss one single thing while I was here, and turning around would mean looking away from this beautiful view. "There are 15 floors in this building." Still without looking at him I asked, "Is it really fair that you are making the others walk up all those floors?" Noelle chucked his teeth softly, but it sounded much louder in the small space. "They will be fine. They could do for a little exercise." I was almost positive that he was smiling, and the thought made me smile a bit too. As soon as the elevator dinged and came to a full stop, the doors opened behind me, and I had to physically push myself away from the glass so that I could turn around and walk out of the elevator. "If you like it that much, we can have our meeting in there and just keep going up and down until we're done," Rowan joked. I looked over at him as I followed him down a small hallway that was brightly lit with similar decor as the lobby. We have had so little encounters prior to this meeting, so I wasn't sure if this was his usual nature or if the gruff and aggressive person I usually encounter was going to show himself soon. "No, if we have our meeting in there, I'll never be able to pay attention to you," I replied with a bit of a playful tone myself. Both Rowan and Noelle laughed softly, and that helped to lighten a little bit of the nerves that still irked me. There were only 3 doors down this hall, one at the very end, and one on each side of the hallway. The furthest one at the end had half of the wall made of glass, just like the outside of the building. As we got closer to them I could see that there was a large oval table with quite a few people sitting around it. To my surprise, Alpha Rogan and VIT were among them. I was afraid that we were going to be joining them, but Rowan stopped just short of the door on left. There was a small sitting area here with chairs that faced the opposite walls. Rowan swiped his hand along a little plate on the wall next to the door and it slid open. Okay, now I was really impressed, but I had to bite my lip to keep from asking how he had done it. Again, Rowan held out his arm as if he was holding the door open for me and gestured with his other hand for me to enter the room. Noelle was about to follow me in, when Rowan put his arm out to block his way. "I am scheduled to have a meeting with Ms. Solemeyer. Does she really need to have a bodyguard with her in my personal office?" Even though Rowan spoke jovially, the look on his face seemed stern. Noelle looked at me as if he was asking what I would like to do, but we had no way to link with each other, so I just nodded at him as if to say, "Just do as he says." I knew the second that Alpha Rogan saw Noelle sitting outside the room he would be furious, but there was only so much I could say to Rowan to explain why he was with me. Noelle nodded and said, "I'll be right outside, little miss, in case you need anything." As Noelle moved to the side to stand against the wall, Rowan closed the door and motioned me forward. The office I stood in was brightly lit and had a small desk with 2 chairs in front of it. There was a large white couch on the far side of the room with a little coffee cart and refrigerator on the opposite end of the wall. I sat in one of the soft white leather chairs in front of the small wood desk, and Rowan removed his jacket and placed it on a hook before he took a seat in the big black leather chair on his side of the desk. There were paintings and plaques all along the walls. I looked around the room and tried to focus on everything other than the man sitting in front of me. Heat was rushing to my cheeks and I knew that I was probably bright red right now. I have never been in a situation like this before and I wasn't sure how to handle it right now. When I finally looked to Rowan, he was staring right at me. I wasn't sure how to proceed, so I just blurted, "Am I getting fired?" Shock crossed Rowan's handsome features before he replied, "Is that what you think was going to happen today?" I couldn't even talk, so I just nodded my head. Rowan just continued to stare at me for a few seconds longer. I adjusted my blouse and vest as I waited for him to continue. He leaned back in his chair and tilted his head as if he was considering something. "I was curious to know who you were and how you ended up getting the position that you have. Why don't you tell me what it is, Ms. Solemeyer, that makes you so goddamn special?"